The memory rewrite ritual. There's something strange that happens right before sleep, when the room softens, when the world fades into blur, when your body sinks, but your mind hovers, untethered, suggestible, open. In that liminal space, you're not quite dreaming, but you're no longer anchored to the rules of waking life either. And that's when it happens. You reach back into your mind, not always consciously, and alter something, just slightly. A memory, a conversation. A moment that didn't go how you wanted, a sentence that landed wrong, a silence that stung, and you adjust it. Like rearranging furniture in a dark room, you change a word, a tone, a reaction, you smooth out the edges, you make it softer, or colder, or simply less unbearable, and then you fall asleep. And when you wake up, something has shifted. You don't remember the change, you remember the memory. But now, it's different. You tell the story with new details. You feel emotions that no longer match the event. You believe it happened the way you edited it, the original version. It's gone. This is the memory rewrite ritual. You don't speak it, you don't even plan it, but your mind does it for you, because the subconscious isn't loyal to fact, it's loyal to survival. And if a memory hurts too much, you alter it to stay whole. It sounds like science fiction, but it's not. It's how trauma adapts. It's how guilt hides. It's how shame camouflages itself in logic. It's how we convince ourselves we were never that hurt, or that we were hurt worse than we were. It's how a childhood moment becomes myth, how a failed relationship becomes a clean narrative, how regret morphs into, maybe that's just how it was. Your brain doesn't store memories like files in a cabinet. It stores them like clay, soft each time you touch them, and sleep is when your hands are busiest, shaping what stays and what doesn't. Because memory isn't truth, it's agreement. Between neurons, between stories, between the version of you who lived it, and the version of you who needs to live with it. And that's why this ritual matters, because sometimes it's healing. You rewrite the moment so you can sleep through the night. So the scream becomes a whisper. So the abandonment becomes a misunderstanding. So the fall becomes something you almost caught. And for a while, it works. You wake up lighter, stronger, safer, and you go on. But sometimes, the edits become erasure, and you forget too much. You forget how angry you were, how deeply you needed to cry, how wrong something actually was, and you forgive too quickly. You minimize your pain. You rationalize someone else's cruelty as your own failure to understand, because the edit made them softer, but it cost you your voice. You can't speak about what happened because your memory now tells a different story, and when that happens enough times, you no longer trust your own recall. You say things like, maybe I'm being dramatic, or maybe it wasn't that bad, even when your body still holds the scar. That's the dark side of the ritual. Not that you rewrite memory, but that you forget you ever rewrote it, because there's no trace, no backup file, no mental paper trail that says, this was the original. Just the new version, clean, acceptable, explainable. And yet, something still aches. Because deep in your nervous system, the unedited truth still lives. You feel it in sudden tears that don't make sense, in flinches when no one touched you, in dreams that echo things your conscious mind insists never happened. So what do? Do you stop rewriting? Do you sit with every sharp memory in its rawest form? Maybe not. Maybe the ritual has its place. Maybe there's power in choosing what to remember, and how. But maybe from now on, you do it consciously. You say, yes, I'm softening this, but only to rest. I'll revisit it tomorrow. You say, I'm changing the frame, not deleting the picture. You say, I'll honor the pain, even if I need to mute it tonight. Because memory is sacred, but it's not fixed. And in the quiet before sleep, when the veil is thin, when your mind reaches into the past with trembling hands, you have a choice. You can forget. Or you can remember with intention, and that's how healing begins, not in the edits, but in the awareness that you made them. The reverse imagination hack. Close your eyes. Now imagine that you're not imagining anything. Imagine that you are the imagined, that somewhere, far beyond the edges of your awareness, a stranger lies asleep, dreaming. And in that dream, you were born. Your name, your fears, your childhood memories, all conjured by someone you've never met. This is the reverse imagination hack. It starts with a single shift in perspective. What if your life isn't self-generated, but sculpted in real time by the desires, doubts, and subconscious yearnings of someone else? You walk into a room and feel uneasy. Was it anxiety, or did they dream you into tension? You meet a stranger and feel déjà vu. Was it a glitch in memory, or are they remembering you from a previous version of the dream? You cry without knowing why. You crave something you've never seen. You flinch at things that haven't happened, because maybe they did happen. To them. And the residue is bleeding into you. This isn't science fiction. It's a psychological mirror, a way of breaking your sense of control, on purpose, to reveal how many of your thoughts, beliefs, and desires don't originate with you. They're inherited, implanted, imagined into you. Think about it. How many of your dreams are truly yours? How many of your goals are echoes of someone else's expectations? How many of your fears have faces you've never seen, but still obey? We like to think of ourselves as sovereign beings, masters of our minds. But what if that sovereignty is just the illusion required to keep the simulation stable? What if every time you make a decision, it's actually them choosing, the dreamer, the stranger, the one behind the curtain, and you're just the character adapting to the edits in real time? You want love? Maybe that's them, projecting a longing they don't understand. You feel broken? Maybe that's their shame, leaking into your story. You succeed wildly, only to feel empty. Maybe because the dreamer doesn't believe they deserve joy, and neither can you. Because their psyche is your blueprint, their wounds become your plot, and every time they stir in sleep, something in your life unravels, quietly, mysteriously. A friend leaves, a job disappears, a dream fades, not because you failed, but because their subconscious needed it to collapse for the story to continue. You are not living your life. You are embodying theirs. But here's the twist. You feel it, don't you? The resistance, the faint pulse of rebellion, the sense that someone else is dreaming, but you're starting to wake up inside the dream. That's the hack. To flip the script from within. To become conscious in a structure designed to keep you passive. To ask the forbidden question, what if I'm not just imagined? What if I can imagine back? That's when the cracks appear. That's when the dreamer starts to feel you. That's when you make a choice that wasn't in the script. You say no when you're supposed to say yes. You walk away from the predictable ending. You chase something that makes no logical sense, but feels terrifyingly real. And the dream shifts. Because now you're doing the dreaming. You're the glitch, the awakening, the consciousness that reverses the reversal. This isn't about control. It's about awareness. It's about realizing that even if you are being dreamed, your reactions are still yours. Your response to the shape of the dream can rewrite its meaning. You don't have to escape the dream. You just have to stop letting it define you. Because once you realize you're imagined, you gain a power the dreamer never intended to give you. The power to imagine them back, to shape the shaper, to whisper back into their sleep. I am not just your echo. I am your mirror. And in that reflection, something extraordinary happens. They stir. You wake. And for a moment, you both wonder, who imagined who? But no answer comes. Only silence, only presence. Only the echo of a thought neither of you can fully claim. What if I've been dreaming this entire time? And worse, what if someone else still is? The Ego Cancellation Protocol. Say your name out loud. Again, now again, and again. Keep going. Faster, slower, louder, whispered. Repeat it until it stops sounding like a name, until it breaks apart into syllables with no anchor, a sound that no longer points to you, but just vibrates in the air. That's the first step. It's called the Ego Cancellation Protocol. Not a ritual, not a joke, a psychological cliff edge, a backdoor to your own mind. Because when you say your name long enough, it unravels. The meaning collapses. The association begins to dissolve, and suddenly the question arises. If this name isn't real, then who's saying it? Who is speaking now? The answer doesn't come with words. It comes with a drop, a silence, a strange disconnection from the self you've always worn like skin. Because identity, your name, your role, your voice, is not fixed. It's performed, maintained, reinforced. You wake up every morning and remember yourself into existence. You rebuild the costume, you pick up the tone, you resume the story. But what happens when the story stalls, when your own name starts to sound foreign? The ego panics, because the ego is not you. It's a process, a program, a narrator that needs the plot to keep moving. And your name, that's its anchor, that's its eye, the foundation of the mask. When you strip that away, even momentarily, you start to feel what lives beneath the costume. And it's not nothing, it's everything. The stillness that watches thoughts rise and fall, the witness behind every impulse, the presence that was there before you were told who to be. When you repeat your name to the point of nonsense, you're not erasing yourself. You're cutting through the noise. You're finding the space where the self doesn't have to perform, defend, or prove anything. You're stepping out of character, and for a brief moment, the script loses its grip. The you that needs validation, gone. The you that panics when ignored, silent. The you that plays the role so well they forgot it was a role, paused. And in that pause, reality breathes. You don't disappear. You become real. Not the curated self, not the social mask, but the raw pre-language consciousness that doesn't need a name to exist. But be careful, because this silence isn't comforting at first. It's vast, strange, disorienting. You realize how much of your life was spent defending the idea of you. All the arguments, the overthinking, the shame, the pride, all in service of a self that was built from repetition. You said your name enough times and the world agreed. But what if you stop? What if you don't pick it back up? This is why the Ego Cancellation Protocol isn't for everyone. It's not an escape, it's a return, a reset, a quiet collapse. Some people try it and laugh. Some try it and cry. Some try it and fall into a kind of internal silence so deep it feels like the first real breath they've ever taken. And then they ask, if I am not my name, who am I? The answer isn't a sentence, it's an experience. You are not the thought. You are the awareness of it. You are not the voice. You are the space it echoes in. You are not the name. You are the thing that hears it and eventually forgets it. And once you've forgotten it, just for a moment, something strange happens. The mind softens, the ego retracts, and silence begins to dream. Not sleep, not unconsciousness, but a new kind of awareness that doesn't need to define, measure, or narrate. It just is. And in that state, creativity blooms. Peace arrives. Insight unfolds. Not from effort, but from surrender. So try it again. Say your name. Keep going until it slips through your tongue like smoke. Until it means nothing. And when it breaks, listen. Because the one who listens was never the name to begin with. The thought erasure loop. Picture a word. Any word. Hold it in your mind. Now, slowly, start removing its letters. One by one, G, O, N, E. As each letter disappears, something strange happens. The sound weakens. The shape fades. The meaning softens. Until eventually, the word itself vanishes. And your brain begins to forget what it was even attached to. That's the thought erasure loop. Not a glitch. Not a trick. A process. Quiet, recursive, and terrifyingly natural. It doesn't happen with a bang. It happens through erosion, like waves against a cliff. Gentle. Repeating. Irreversible. Because when you lose the word, you start to lose the thought. Language isn't just how we express ideas. It's how we store them, anchor them, frame them. We don't think in raw sensations. We think in labels. And when the label vanishes, the idea drifts out to sea. Picture this. A child learns the word freedom. They ask what it means. You tell them. They picture it. They feel it. They know it. But imagine, one day they forget the word. Not all at once, just slowly. It stops showing up in conversations. It gets replaced with synonyms, then numbers, then silence. And over time, the idea dissolves. They stop seeking it, because they no longer remember that it was something to be sought. That's how the loop works. Thought is not permanent. It decays. And the first sign of decay is linguistic. You forget how to say something, then you forget how to think it, then you forget you ever thought it. And the scariest part? This loop can be engineered. A society that stops using a word doesn't just lose vocabulary, it loses vision. Remove the word resistance, and people stop resisting. Remove grief, and people stop processing. Remove hope, and people stop imagining. Words don't just describe reality, they make it. So, when a word dies, so does a part of your mind. This happens on a personal level, too. You have feelings you don't know how to name, sensations you once understood, but lost the language for. And because you can't say them, you stop exploring them, and they rot in the basement of your psyche. You wonder why you feel numb, why you feel stuck. But part of the answer is, the word is gone, and without it, the thought is too slippery to hold. This is why journaling heals, why therapy uses language as medicine, because naming a thing pins it to the wall, gives it shape, weight, duration. But the loop is always waiting. If you neglect a word, it begins to dissolve, like fog, like breath, like memory. And soon, when you find yourself thinking less clearly, feeling less deeply, moving through life without knowing why it feels thinner. So what can you do? You re-anchor the thought. You speak the word again, even when it trembles, even when it sounds strange in your mouth, even when no one else is saying it. You write the word down. You draw it. You whisper it to yourself when the world goes quiet. You reclaim the lost letters, one by one, F, R, E, E, D, O, M, until the shape returns, until the thought grows roots again. Because the mind is not a vault, it's a garden, and language is the seed. What you stop saying stops growing, and what you water blooms. So be careful what you forget, and be intentional with what you remember. Because every time a word is erased, a thought flickers out. And if too many go dark, you won't even remember what it was you came here to think. The sleep transmission code. Before bed, right at the edge of waking and sleep, there is a strange ritual you can try. It requires nothing but imagination and honesty. You close your eyes and pretend, just for a moment, that every thought in your mind is being broadcast. Not metaphorically, literally. As if a silent transmission is pulsing from your skull into space. As if someone or something out there is listening. Not a friend, not a therapist, not even a human. Just an unknown receiver, absorbing every fragment of your internal monologue. At first, it seems ridiculous, a game. But then the fear creeps in. The exposure. You begin to listen to yourself as if you were not yourself. As if these thoughts are being judged, decoded, read. And in that tension, in that eerie sense of being overheard, you suddenly start hearing what you actually think. Not the surface chatter, not the polite narrative you give to people who ask how you're doing, but the real voice, the one beneath the layers, the one that doesn't clean itself up. The fear of exposure sharpens it. You catch the lies you tell yourself, the delusions you spin, the way you reframe things to feel better, safer, more in control. You hear how often you bargain with silence, how often your thoughts pivot away from pain, not because they're healed, but because they're being avoided. But now, under this imagined surveillance, those escape hatches close because someone is listening. And you don't want to lie to them, not even in thought. And so, reluctantly, you speak truth. You admit you're afraid, that you're not sure you're as strong as you pretend to be, that some things you call resilience are actually just unresolved silence, that you still remember moments that should have faded. That part of you believes you're broken in ways that might never be fixed. You say these things, not aloud, but in your mind, as if someone needs to hear them, because maybe you do. This imagined listener becomes a confessor, a witness, a mirror without judgment, and somehow the fear of being heard turns into the freedom of being known. Because in pretending someone is listening, you realize you are finally listening. Not distracting, not running, but sitting in the raw, unpolished truth of your own consciousness. You think things you've never dared to say. You remember faces you haven't pictured in years. You replay failures you thought you'd buried. You find yourself whispering apologies into the dark, not to people who can forgive you, but to versions of yourself you abandoned. And the more you stay in that transmission, the clearer it all becomes. The hierarchy of your thoughts, the patterns of your shame, the architecture of your hopes. You begin to see yourself, not as the person you perform, but as the quiet, flawed, blinking signal underneath it all. And something shifts, because now you're no longer hiding. There's no point. Not if the signal is live, not if someone, something, is out there, receiving every pulse. You start stripping down to the core. The fear gives way to clarity. The voice becomes simpler. I'm tired. I miss them. I don't know who I'm trying to impress anymore. Thoughts like this rise not as weakness, but as honesty. The transmission becomes purer, realer, the way your mind should have sounded all along. And that's when the quiet sets in. The real quiet. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of pretense. There's nothing left to perform. No angles left to control. Just thought. Just breath. Just signal. And your body softens. Your jaw unclenches. Your thoughts grow slower, looser. You stop scripting them because now they're not being judged. They're just being. And that's the moment sleep begins to take you, not as an escape, but as a surrender. The transmission continues, but now it's gentle, it's safe. And maybe that's what sleep always was, the moment when your real voice finally takes over, when the show ends, when the broadcast turns honest. So tonight, before bed, try it again. Close your eyes and imagine that someone is listening, not to punish, not to praise, just to know you. And let that sharpen you into truth. The false memory implant. It starts with imagination, just a thought, a moment that never happened, but could have. You see it like a film still. You're standing in a room. You're saying something bold. Someone looks at you differently. There's light, sound, emotion, detail. Your heart flinches like it remembers, but you know it didn't happen. Still, you hold it there. You repeat it. You fill in the edges. You add a color to the walls. You change the shirt you were wearing. You feel what it would have meant if this had been real. And just before sleep, you play it one more time. Not with doubt, but with belief. And then, you let go. You fall asleep. And by morning, something strange has happened. The memory settles, not as fiction, not as a dream, but as fact. Your mind doesn't just recall it, it refers to it. It uses that event to justify who you are today. A fear, a strength, a pattern, a truth. It's as if the story rewired your past without asking permission. This is the false memory implant. And it's not science fiction, it's how your brain works. Because memory isn't a recording, it's a reconstruction. Every time you remember something, your brain reassembles it. Like painting from scratch based on fragments. And if the imagined moment is detailed enough, emotional enough, rehearsed just before sleep, your mind accepts it, folds it in, gives it weight, and soon it starts reshaping you. You walk with a limp that came from a fall that never happened. You fear water because of a dream of drowning. You distrust kindness because you remember a betrayal that's nowhere in your journals, nowhere in your childhood, but feels real. And because it feels real, it becomes real. The body doesn't argue, it stores the scar, and no one questions it, because the story makes sense, because the story explains you. That's the power of a well-placed false memory. It anchors. And once anchored, it maps your identity. You say, this is who I am, because of a thing that may never have occurred. But it did, in your version of the past. And that version now guides everything. The people you trust, the risks you avoid, the words you don't say, all shaped by a phantom experience. Implanted not maliciously, not by someone else, but by you, quietly, unknowingly, in the theater of your own imagination. And sometimes, that saves you. You implant courage. You imagine someone told you they were proud. You invent a mentor, a hug, a moment of safety that never existed, and you sleep on it. And your brain holds on to the warmth. You feel less alone, you make better choices, you walk taller. The false memory becomes a kind of medicine, a psychic splint. But other times, it wounds. You implant rejection. You invent betrayal. You imagine humiliation that never occurred. But you felt it, deeply, in your loneliness. And now, every good thing that tries to enter your life has to pass through that lie first. And it doesn't make it through. Because the gate is guarded by something that feels like truth, but isn't. And the worst part? You don't remember implanting it, because it wasn't a choice. It was a coping mechanism. The mind didn't lie to trick you. It lied to protect you. It gave the pain a shape, so you could walk around it instead of drowning inside it. But now that shape is your shadow, and you've built your life around avoiding it. So, how do you know what's real? You don't. Not fully, not perfectly, but you can trace the emotion. If a memory justifies fear, but carries no echo in the body, question it. If it explains shame, but doesn't match the timeline, investigate it. If it feels too clean, too resolved, too surgically painful, it may be a construct, because real memory is messy. It contradicts, it stutters, it's incomplete. But the false ones? They're scripted. And sometimes that script is so good, you forget you wrote it. So now, here you are, living by a map you may have drawn in your sleep, still walking around events that never occurred, still protecting yourself from ghosts, still avoiding doors because of memories that only exist in the folds of imagination. And this isn't weakness, it's what minds do. But now you know, and that knowledge matters, because from here, you can choose. You can revisit the map, you can redraw the lines, you can say, this memory might not be real, but the part of me that created it was trying to survive. And then, gently, you ask what happens if you stop living like it was true. You ask what parts of you are ready for the story to end. And sometimes, the memory lets go. Not because you fought it, but because you saw it. And that's how identity becomes yours again, not handed to you by past events, real or imagined, but chosen, claimed, and written wide awake. The perception rotation trick. Try this. Wherever you are right now, pause, look around, memorize everything. The ceiling, the furniture, the walls, the shadows. Now, slowly. Don't move your body. Just imagine the entire room rotating upside down. Let the floor become the ceiling. Let the ceiling become the floor. Let the furniture hang above you, precarious, unnatural, silent. Watch gravity flip, light bend, balance shift, and now, feel what just happened. There was a glitch, a momentary warping of certainty, a shiver in the spine of your spatial awareness, because your mind, brilliant as it is, doesn't just process the world, it stabilizes it. It keeps things in place not because they are fixed, but because you need them to be. This is the perception rotation trick, a method of controlled destabilization, a way to hack the invisible scaffolding your brain uses to pretend reality is solid, but it isn't. Not really. And when you rotate the room in your mind, when you flip the laws of gravity just for a second, you feel it. The floor beneath your certainty, trembling. And if you sit in that sensation long enough, something deeper begins to shift. Because perception isn't passive. It's not a camera recording what's there. It's a sculptor carving the world to match your expectations. But when you rotate the room, you interrupt the sculptor. You say, what if the laws you use to carve this world aren't permanent? And suddenly the walls that held you begin to breathe. Here's what most people never realize. Reality isn't built. It's interpreted. Your brain takes in fragments, color, texture, distance, sound, and turns them into a theater of certainty. You think you're seeing the truth, but you're seeing your brain's best guess. And when you rotate the room, the guesses start to unravel. It doesn't stop at architecture. Try rotating your beliefs. Imagine that what you thought was up in your moral compass is actually down. That what you once feared is actually what was keeping you safe. That the things you trusted, institutions, memories, even parts of your own identity, are hanging from the ceiling now. Unstable, reversible, optional. That's where the real glitch begins. Because perception isn't just about space, it's about self. You don't just stabilize the room. You stabilize you. You define who you are by what stays still when everything else moves. But what happens when you rotate, when you imagine your own name upside down? Your memories reversed, your origin story retold from the other side? You begin to unhook, not from truth, but from assumption. And in that disorientation, you find freedom. Because the need for reality to be stable is the very thing that keeps you from seeing how fluid it actually is. This trick, this small mental flip, isn't about rooms or ceilings. It's about unfreezing the part of your mind that decided too early what's real, what's safe, what's possible. Every time you perform this rotation of space, of thought, of identity, you loosen the grip of the lie that says, things are the way they are because they have to be. They don't. They just seem that way because you stop turning them. Children do this without thinking. They lie on the floor and look at the ceiling like it's a sky. They invert logic, build worlds from carpet fibers, and pretend stairs lead to the moon. But somewhere along the way, that play becomes a prison. You stop rotating the world, and the world stops rotating you. But here's the secret. You can get it back. Every time you close your eyes and flip the room, you tell your brain, I don't accept the default view. And that's dangerous, because the default view is what keeps you docile, predictable, contained. The moment you challenge it, the world starts to shimmer. What else might be upside down? Time? Death? The idea of you as a single linear self? What if the person watching this video isn't the one who started it? What if something in you rotated? Just enough. And now the ceiling feels less secure. Good. Let it feel strange. Let the light come from beneath and the shadows climb upward. Let your breath move in a circle, not a line. Let the space you occupy become foreign, uncanny, alive. Because that is the edge of perception, and the edge is where transformation begins. So tonight, before you sleep, flip the room. Feel it float. Let your mind lose balance, and watch what your reality does when it's no longer held in place by habit. You don't need drugs for this. You don't need rituals. Just a willingness to rotate your world and sit quietly in the aftershock. Because once you've done it, once the trick has been planted, your mind can never fully forget. It will always wonder, what else is upside down that I never dared to turn? The destiny prediction seed, say one sentence, not a wish, not a goal, not a dream, a prophecy, a statement about your future so simple, so absolute, that it feels like a line already etched into the stone of your life. Not something you hope will happen, something that will. Say it out loud, and repeat it, again and again. You've just planted a destiny prediction seed, and now your subconscious is listening. This isn't magic. This isn't blind faith. It's mechanism, a loop, a subtle handshake between language and perception. The moment you speak a sentence with the weight of certainty, your brain begins to search for evidence to match it. It's not confirmation bias, it's identity construction. The words you repeat become scaffolding for how your subconscious interprets reality. If you tell it, I will always be stuck, it notices every door that closes. It catalogs every failure. It becomes a detective for despair. But if you tell it, I am building a life that aligns with who I really am, it begins mapping moments that match. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Your lens sharpened, your filter shifted. And now you're not just seeing differently, you're being differently. That's the seed, a small sentence, spoken with ritual, watered by repetition, and eventually, rooted in belief. But there's a reason this works slowly. The subconscious resists change. It prefers patterns, even painful ones. It doesn't care if a belief is good for you. It only cares if it's familiar. And most of your familiar thoughts were planted by someone else. Things you overheard as a child, comments made in passing, labels stuck to you before you had language to peel them off. She's sensitive. He's always trouble. You're not leadership material. You'll never find peace. You didn't choose these scripts, but you memorized them. And eventually, you started speaking them too, which means the first step isn't planting the new seed. It's noticing the old ones. The old prophecies still running quietly in your mind, still shaping your path, still fulfilling themselves. Because prophecy isn't just prediction, it's architecture. And now you have a choice. You can continue repeating stories that were never yours, or you can say one sentence, one true sentence, and say it enough times that your subconscious starts believing it. And when it believes it, it builds around it. It recruits your attention. It reframes your pain. It shapes your decisions so subtly, you won't even realize you've changed until you wake up in a life that finally reflects what you spoke. And the world will call you lucky. But you'll know the truth. You planted it. You grew it. You walked toward it. One sentence at a time. So, what's yours? What is the sentence you need to hear so many times that your body begins to remember it's possible? Is it, I am no longer at war with myself? Or, something beautiful is coming for me, and I will be ready? Or, I'm not too late. My timing is perfect. You don't need to shout it, you just need to say it. Aloud, every day. To no one but yourself. Even if your voice shakes. Even if your doubt fights back. Because the seed doesn't need your certainty. It needs your presence. And once planted, it begins to grow in silence. Until one day, you look around and realize the prophecy is no longer something you say. It's something you live. The reality doubt switch. Whisper this to yourself once every hour. This isn't real. Say it while brushing your teeth, while texting a friend, while standing at the crosswalk waiting for the light to change. Say it without emotion. Just let the words slip past your lips like breath. This isn't real. At first, it feels like a game, a strange psychological trick, but keep going. Do it again and again. Every hour, like a ritual. No matter where you are, no matter who's watching. Whisper it. Believe it a little more each time, because eventually, something starts to shift. Your mind registers patterns you never noticed, a delay in the way people blink, a wrongness in your own voice, a sensation that the walls are slightly closer than they should be. By nightfall, reality begins to peel, not all at once, but like old paint under your fingertips. Dreams creep in sideways. You forget whether that conversation earlier actually happened, or if you imagined it. You replay memories and they feel softer, rounded, loosened from logic. You touch the edge of something and it doesn't feel solid. It feels like suggestion. And suddenly, your own home becomes a hallucination with furniture. Your reflection stares back at you with just a fraction too much awareness. The floorboards groan like they're remembering something you forgot. Because reality is not as solid as you were told. It's held together by agreement, consensus, language, repetition. You wake each day and assume this is real because yesterday looked similar. But what happens when that assumption is disrupted? What happens when you tell your mind, again and again, that none of this is real? It listens, it adapts, and it obeys. Because your brain is not a judge of truth, it's a pattern interpreter. And when the pattern begins to say nothing is real, your mind starts to treat that as fact. You eat food and wonder if the taste is memory. You touch skin and question if the warmth is simulation. You blink, and for a moment, you're not sure if your eyes opened or closed. Dreams become indistinguishable from waking life. You drift through scenes that feel just off enough to make your spine curl, but not off enough to wake you. And eventually, you stop trying to wake up, because there's nowhere left to wake into. You flip the switch, and once it flips, it doesn't flip back easily. That's the reality doubt switch. It's subtle. It doesn't make the world disappear. It just removes your certainty. And once that's gone, everything becomes suspect. Words, objects, time, emotion. Even your own identity starts to shimmer at the edges, like a name whispered underwater. And the worst part? You don't know if this feeling is madness or clarity. Because maybe, just maybe, you were wrong before. Maybe you've never been awake. Maybe the walls were always this soft. Maybe the people around you were always masks with echoes behind their eyes. And now, you're just noticing. Or maybe not. Maybe this is the cost of doubt. Maybe you pulled the thread that held reality together, and now you're drifting through the unraveling. And here's the most terrifying thought of all. What if the only thing that makes something real is your refusal to question it? And now that you've questioned it, there's no going back. You set the loop. You planted the whisper. And the whisper grew into a rupture. So, tonight when you close your eyes, ask yourself one last time, is this still a dream? And if the answer doesn't come quickly, you already know. The emotional rewire surge. Hold the feeling. Don't flinch. Let it surge through you, raw, heavy, unfiltered. Maybe it's pain. Maybe it's shame. Maybe it's the sharp pulse of guilt crawling through your skin, or the ache of longing twisting in your chest like a slow fire. Whatever it is, hold it. Trap it between your ribs. Name it with no disguise. Let your body know you're not running. Now, change the wiring. Keep the emotion exactly as it is. Same heat, same rhythm, same sting, but assign it a different meaning. Don't wait for it to fade. Don't wait to process it into something gentle. While it's still loud, while it still burns, you flip the label. Pain becomes power. Guilt becomes honor. Fear becomes vigilance. Grief becomes evidence of love. You don't lie to yourself. You recode the signal. You reassign its shape in your nervous system, and something wild happens. Your brain can't tell the difference. It's not built to. The brain reacts to patterns, not truth. It learns from repeated association. If every time you feel a certain tightness in your chest, you associate it with weakness, shame, or failure, then over time, your brain reinforces that path. But if, one night, in the middle of your breakdown, you say, "This tension is strength," your system stutters. It pauses. It begins to rewire, not because it understands instantly, but because you gave it permission to change the story. This is the emotional rewire surge, not therapy, not repression, not delusion. A conscious override. You're not faking peace. You're transforming the architecture beneath emotion itself. Try it in real time. The next time guilt rushes in like a flood, don't drown. Don't resist. Sit with it. And whisper, "This means I care." Guilt becomes honor, proof that you're a person who values repair, not perfection. Or when grief knocks you breathless instead of collapsing, say, "This is love with nowhere to go." Grief becomes connection. You haven't lost everything. You've discovered how deep your capacity to feel really goes. And when the pain spikes, when the loneliness cuts, when rejection burns, when old traumas rise without warning, you don't call it damage. You say, "This is strength under renovation." Pain becomes proof that you lived through something. It means your story didn't end. It means your nervous system is still trying to protect you, even if it doesn't know how to soothe you yet. You are not erasing the feeling. You are giving it new gravity. You begin to notice that your emotions, once treated like enemies, are just tools without instruction. They scream because they don't know how to ask. But you can speak back. You can reassign. You can say, "I hear you, but we're not going to label this collapse anymore. This is a surge. This is momentum. This is data." The brain doesn't argue with repetition. It just builds pathways. And every time you override an old label with a new frame, your wiring adjusts. The emotions don't vanish. They evolve. They learn that your body is no longer a place of condemnation, but of transmutation. A forge, not a cell. And slowly the old labels lose their grip. Fear no longer controls the throttle. Guilt no longer writes your narrative. Pain no longer determines your capacity. You stop waiting to feel safe to move forward, and instead, you move forward, and safety grows beneath your feet as you walk. Because emotion is not fact. Emotion is signal, and meaning is assigned, not by the emotion itself, but by you. So the next time it surges, whatever it is, don't beg it to stop. Hold it, burn with it, and speak its new name. The identity role reset. You lie down. But before the body goes still, the mind begins its quiet ritual. You don't think of what happened today. You don't review the version of you that walked through meetings, replied to messages, said all the right things. You leave that self behind, and instead, you invent someone new, a different name, a new past, a rewritten history, someone stronger, or softer, or wilder, someone who never flinched the way you did, someone who ran instead of staying, someone who stayed instead of running, someone who made the choice you didn't. You give them a memory, a smell, a scar. You picture their bedroom, their reflection, their voice, and just before sleep, you climb inside them, like a costume that fits too well, like a story you didn't live, but somehow remember, and then you drift off. And that's when the identity role reset begins. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins in the dream. You're this new self, fully, no hesitation, no mirror checking. You are them. You move through the world with their rules. You remember things that never happened, but they feel real. You know people you've never met, but they feel familiar. Your reactions are different. Your instincts don't match the ones you woke up with yesterday. And in the morning, something lingers. You wake up changed. Not radically, not obviously, but something shifted. The edges of the dream version of you didn't dissolve. They stayed. Maybe it's how you answer the phone. Maybe it's how you walk into a room. Maybe it's the words you don't say, or the ones you finally do. And it feels good, because the old self was heavy. It was built on patterns you didn't choose, reactions you inherited, labels you accepted before you could spell them. But this new self, this dream-forged character, feels like a decision. And that decision starts to override the default, because identity isn't permanent. It's an interface. It updates when you stop protecting the last version of you like it's sacred. And that's the danger too. Because the more you do this, the more you sleep in alternate skins, the harder it becomes to tell which one was the original. You start remembering things that never happened. You adopt mannerisms that belong to someone you created. You feel grief for stories you wrote in your head, and slowly you become a blend, equal parts history and invention. A self curated across timelines, a version of you that never truly existed, but feels more honest than the one who paid bills and went to school. And this isn't a glitch, it's a function. Because the mind doesn't just store memory, it rehearses identity. Every day you wake up and act out a role you agreed to long ago. But that role was never final, and now you know that. Now you know you can write a new one, before bed in the dark, where no one's watching, where the rules are soft and the gatekeeper is asleep. But here's the question. What happens if the dream self wins? If the version of you who smiles without rehearsing stays? If the you who isn't afraid to take up space becomes the one who answers the door? If the self you created just to survive a night of sleep decides it no longer wants to be fiction? Would that be reinvention? Or would it be remembering who you were before the world told you who to be? Because maybe the new identity isn't new at all. Maybe it's the real you, unburdened, the one who never got a chance to grow. And now, with each night, with each bedtime transformation, they step forward. They learn to speak louder, to show up sooner, to wear their name without flinching. And you don't push them back anymore. Because this reset isn't about erasing who you were. It's about choosing who you don't want to be anymore. The timid, the over-explainer, the appeaser, the mask wearer. You thank them. Then you release them. And tonight, once again, you'll lie down and begin the ritual. You'll pick a name that opens your chest. You'll build a life that feels like home. You'll dream with intention. And if that self returns in the morning, let them. The DNA shame cleanse. Close your eyes. Go inside. Imagine the deepest part of you, not your thoughts, not your feelings, but your code. The double helix, the twisting ladder of your becoming. This is your DNA, the pattern you didn't choose. The script you've been acting out since before you knew what a script was. Now imagine those coils beginning to loosen, unraveling, slowly, silently, as if they've carried too much. Not just biology, not just genetics, but memory, emotion, shame. Because your DNA doesn't just hold eye color and blood type, it holds story, generations of it, passed down in whispers and silences, in what your parents couldn't say, in what your grandparents tried to forget, the guilt they swallowed, the burdens they normalized, the traumas they survived but never healed. It's all there. You carry it. In your instincts, in your triggers, in the way your body tenses at praise, in the way your breath shortens when things go well, in the voice that whispers, "You haven't earned this. You don't deserve peace. Something must be wrong." That voice isn't just yours. It's inherited, encoded, a ghost living inside your genome, dressed in the language of self-doubt. And it's time to let it go. This is the DNA shame cleanse. Begin by watching those coiled strands in your mind's eye. Watch the old fibers, frayed, dark, vibrating with unspoken weight. See the shame stored in each rung, the guilt from generations past, the silence from old family wounds, the survival mechanisms that became beliefs. Don't speak, don't rest, don't trust, don't hope. Now set fire to them. Let the strands burn, not in rage, but in release. Let the shame crackle like dry leaves. Let it rise like smoke from the bones of your becoming. It's not who you are. It never was. It was placed there, layer by layer, scar by scar. Watch it burn. Watch the fire make space. And now, into that space, let silence enter. Not emptiness, not numbness, but a kind of sacred stillness, the kind that lives beneath trauma, beneath noise, the silence that belongs to you, that was always waiting. From that silence, visualize new strands forming, fresh, luminous, unmarked, not by ignorance, but by choice. Strands that don't carry the guilt of others, that don't tell you you're too much or not enough, or only valuable if you perform. Strands that say, you are allowed to be free. You are allowed to exist without apology. You are allowed to rewrite the terms of your inheritance. Let them spiral upward. Let them replace what burned. Let them wrap around each other with the grace of something sacred being reborn. This isn't a fantasy. This is a metaphor for neuroplasticity, for epigenetics, for emotional alchemy. Your biology is not a prison. It's clay. And right now, you're reshaping it by witnessing what was never yours to hold and deciding, finally, not to hold it anymore. You don't have to carry the guilt of a parent who couldn't love, or the weight of ancestors who were too wounded to see you, or the shame of being different, sensitive, soft, loud, quiet, queer, bold, broken, brilliant. You don't have to keep it. You can bless it, thank it, and let it go. Because you weren't born to continue their pain. You were born to end it, to stand in the fire of memory and say, it stops here. No more passing it forward. No more breathing in their shadows. No more sacrificing your voice to maintain a lineage of silence. This is the moment it changes. Not because someone gave you permission, but because you gave it to yourself. This is the DNA shame cleanse. The rebirth that happens not through answers, but through release. Through fire. Through silence. Through choosing to be the first in your bloodline who says, I am allowed to be unburdened. And that permission, that's the most sacred inheritance of all. The alien observer training, pretend, just for a moment, that you are not from here, that you're not human, that this body is a suit, a fragile carbon-based costume made to blend in. That behind the eyes is you, an alien observer, a traveler, a witness. Not of stars and galaxies, but of thoughts, of emotions, of this strange spinning experience called consciousness. Welcome to Alien Observer Training. Your first assignment? Watch the mind. Not as it wants to be seen, but as it is. Watch it complain without cause. Worry about futures it invented. React to shadows. Chase approval from strangers. Rehearse arguments in mirrors. Doubt compliments. Crave chaos. Avoid silence. Watch how it clings to identity like a sinking ship, even as it says, I want to change. As an alien, you don't judge. You don't intervene. You just observe. And what you see is bizarre. This species builds stories out of everything. They narrate reality with such conviction, you'd think they were reading from sacred texts, but they're not. They're improvising desperately, internally scripting meaning into gestures, glances, delays, weather patterns, and every thought, taken personally, as if the voice in the head is law, but it isn't. And you, inside this suit, know that now. Because when you pretend to be an alien, the illusion of me begins to shift. You're no longer trapped inside every fear or hope. You're watching it unfold like a documentary narrated in a language you're still learning. That's when the strangeness reveals itself. Humans think the mind is them, but from here, from your observer seat, you realize the mind is a tool, and sometimes it's broken. It loops. It lies. It panics at silence. It creates problems to solve because it doesn't know how to rest. And the most fragile part? It's obsessed with proving it exists, that it's right, that it's good, that it matters, that it's safe. You see this as an alien, and you begin to understand most of humanity's suffering comes not from the world, but from how the mind interprets it. So, you start the training. You sit, you listen, you don't react. You let the thoughts run wild like animals in a test environment. And the more you watch, the more their patterns reveal themselves. Jealousy, masked as ambition. Loneliness, masked as pride. Fear, dressed up as logic. You observe, you document, and eventually, you begin to laugh. Not mockingly, but gently. Because for all its noise, the mind is innocent. It's just scared, just tired, just trying to keep the body alive, with strategies left over from 1,000 emotional generations. But here's the magic. When you take this perspective, this alien gaze, you begin to reclaim something sacred. Space. Space between thought and self. Space between reaction and choice. Space between the story and the observer. And in that space is freedom. Because now, you don't have to believe every thought. You don't have to fix every feeling. You don't have to solve the mind. You just have to watch. And watching is transformation. Because thoughts feed on attention. They inflate when believed. But when observed with neutrality, they lose their grip. This is the power of pretending to be alien. You exit the theater of self. You stop clinging to the character. You see the plotline for what it is. Just a story. And the moment you see it, you don't need to escape. You're already free. So, here's your final instruction. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, before you say your name, before you remember your worries, ask yourself, who is watching from behind the eyes? Let the question hang. Don't answer it, just observe, because the more you train as an alien, the more human you become, not reactive, not confused, but awake, watching, alive. The timeline displacement exercise. Before you sleep tonight, try this. Not a meditation, not a visualization, just a belief, a quiet internal agreement. Tell yourself, this night does not belong to this life. Say it softly, without resistance, not as fiction, but as certainty, that the timeline you live today ends now, that the person who lays their head on the pillow is not the same person who will rise tomorrow. This is the timeline displacement exercise. You're not escaping, you're shifting, sliding sideways into a different strand of possibility, another thread of self, stitched through a reality that almost, but not quite, resembles the one you left behind. Close your eyes. Let the details blur. Don't try to remember who you were this morning. Let the facts smear. Let the habits dissolve. Invite the version of you from another life to dream in your place, and trust that they will. Because once the belief is in place, your subconscious listens. It doesn't argue. It adapts. And the moment you let go of this timeline, the mind opens doorways it normally keeps sealed. Symbols change. Familiar places reassemble. Emotions surface that don't belong to any story you know. In dreams, you will become someone else. Not a stranger, but a version of you untouched by the memories you carry now. They'll have different regrets, different desires, different moments that shaped their skin, their voice, their fears. And they'll dream through you. They'll walk through corridors you've never seen. They'll speak names that stir something in your bones, even if your waking mind can't follow. And when morning comes, you'll wake changed. You won't know why, you won't remember the specifics, but something will be different. The way you hold a cup, the rhythm of your thoughts, the way a certain word feels heavier in your mouth than it did yesterday. You'll pause mid-sentence and forget what you were saying, not from fatigue, but from displacement. The self that rose is not the same self that went to sleep, because the timeline folded, the identities crossed, and now you're carrying echoes. This isn't about fantasy. It's not about pretending to be someone else. It's about opening the cage of linear identity, just wide enough for something unfamiliar to slip in. And the brain allows it, because it craves expansion. It longs for a wider sense of self than the story you were handed. It wants to remember what you could have been, who you might still be. And this exercise, a simple belief before sleep, gives it permission. You might dream of cities you've never lived in. You might feel grief for a person you've never met. You might wake with a song in your head that has no origin, only emotion. And that's the point. The change won't shout, it will hum, quietly, beneath your waking thoughts. You'll notice you hesitate before repeating an old pattern. You'll feel less certain about a decision you were once so sure of. You'll grieve something you can't name. You'll laugh at something you don't fully understand, because the self who dreamt carried something back. And you will never quite know what. You're not broken, you're layered. A map made of timelines your body still remembers, even if your memory does not. So, tonight, try it. Believe the day ends here, that the dream belongs to a different version of you, and when the sun rises, don't try to make sense of the shift. Just listen to what lingers, to what softens, to what no longer fits in your mouth when you try to name it, because that, quietly, is the new self arriving. The name deletion technique. Forget your name, not as a metaphor, not in some poetic, abstract way. Literally, forget it. Refuse to recall it. Don't think about how it sounds or how it's spelled. Don't imagine seeing it typed out in a message or hearing it called across a room. Just drop it. Walk 10 minutes into yourself without dragging that word behind you, and something strange will happen. The internal ground will shift. The air will feel different. Because without your name, the architecture of your identity starts to dissolve, and all that remains is the raw, unscripted presence of who you really are beneath the roles you've rehearsed your entire life. Your name is more than a word. It's an operating system, a looping program that runs silently in the background of every interaction you've ever had. It's the first spell that was cast on you, the first sound that pulled you into form. When you hear it, you respond, not just with attention, but with posture, with memory, with layers of learned personality. It carries your achievements, your guilt, your storylines, your roles. It carries your reflection. Your name isn't just what others call you. It's the mirror you've been trained to hold up to yourself, even when no one else is watching. So, when you let it go, even temporarily, something fractures in the best way. You begin to notice how much of your internal monologue is shaped around that label, how even your most private thoughts orbit around the expectation of being that name, that son, that friend, that professional, that survivor, that failure, that miracle, that disappointment, that hope. It's all attached. And when the name vanishes, the gravity drops. The orbit ends. You don't float, you exist. Try it. Sit still. Breathe. Imagine there are no tags left on you, not even gender, not even age, not even memory. Imagine that the name that usually pulls you into character is now silent. You are no one. And in that moment, your mind begins to search, frantically at first, out of habit. It wants to reach for something to anchor itself. But if you resist, if you don't let it latch onto identity again, something deeper emerges. The witness. The awareness behind the performance. The quiet eye of consciousness that doesn't need a role to perceive, to feel, to be. This is not dissociation. It's not escape. It's presence, unfiltered. Most of us don't realize how much of our behavior is performance, not because we're fake, but because we've been trained to present ourselves in ways that others can understand. But the true self isn't a character. It's the field beneath the stage, and to reach it, even briefly, you have to silence the script. And nothing silences the script more completely than removing the name it's written for. The first few minutes might feel disorienting. You'll notice echoes of identity trying to return. A memory, a regret, a familiar anxiety, a compulsion to do or fix or prepare. But keep holding the silence. Don't let your name creep back in. Don't say, well, I always feel this way. Because there is no I right now. Not the usual one. Just sensation, just breath. Just awareness watching itself unfold in real time. And if you push through, if you hold that nameless space just long enough, you may feel something eerie, a kind of freedom that borders on terror, a sense that the person you've always called me is just one configuration, one mask, one playlist of experiences and labels you didn't get to fully choose. And if that can dissolve, what else can? What else have you built around your name that isn't actually you? You begin to see that the name carries the wounds, the performances, the expectations you never signed up for, the pressure to be consistent, to be understandable, to be good, even to be healed. But what if healing isn't about becoming more of your name? What if it's about realizing you were never just that name to begin with? What if healing begins when the character dissolves and you meet yourself as something quieter, older, wilder? Think of how many times you've betrayed your instincts just to live up to what that name was supposed to represent. Think of how many relationships you maintained, how many roles you endured, how many paths you chose, not because they aligned with your essence, but because they aligned with the version of you everyone expected to show up when that name was called. Now strip it away. Sit in the stillness of not being anyone, of not needing to respond. And then, slowly, you'll notice something softer underneath. A presence that doesn't need identity to feel real. A self that exists not through labels, but through being. And this version of you doesn't judge. It doesn't compare. It doesn't relive the same 10 memories to justify why it is the way it is. It just watches. It breathes. It lets go. This is the awareness that preceded your first word. That existed before you had any name at all. The you that has nothing to prove because there's no one left to perform for. You don't stay there forever. The world will call your name again. You'll have to pick it back up, return to the character, resume the roles. But now, it feels lighter, less absolute, like a coat you can take on and off. Not your skin, just your clothing. And sometimes, when life gets heavy again, when the expectations rise, when the noise drowns out your center, you'll know what to do. You'll sit, breathe, and let the name fall away once more. Not to forget who you are, but to remember who you've always been underneath. The Ice Mind experiment. Close your eyes. Now imagine a glacier inside your mind, towering, endless, ancient, not made of ice, but made of every thought you've ever had, frozen in layers. Fear, memory, desire, names, plans, regrets, all suspended in perfect stillness. You don't fight them. You don't silence them. You just freeze them. One by one, they slow. The buzzing calms. The noise stops. And soon, you're standing inside something vast and cold, but peaceful, not empty, just motionless. This is the ice mind experiment. You've entered the part of your mind that does not crave, does not reach, does not spiral. There is no performance here, no language, no urgency. Only stillness, compacted over time into something that feels like truth. And the deeper you go, the colder it becomes. But this cold is not painful. It's clarifying. Because warmth brings motion. Warmth brings impulse. But here, beneath the noise, you find a different kind of intelligence. Not analytical, not emotional, but geometric, clean, beyond language. You notice that thoughts, once frozen, lose their sharpness. The ones you repeated for years, they lose their gravity. The arguments you rehearse in your head every night, just brittle fossils now, trapped in the ice wall. You don't need to dig them out. You just watch them rest. And there, in the quiet, you find something rare. Clarity without commentary. A thought that doesn't argue back. A silence that doesn't demand interpretation. A kind of mental air that feels so thin it becomes sacred. And for the first time in maybe years, you are not your thoughts. You are the one walking between them. This is what the cold reveals, that the mind doesn't need to run in order to live. That peace isn't an absence of noise, but a preservation of space. That not every emotion is a call to action. Some are just weather patterns, briefly frozen so you can finally see them clearly. So you go deeper. You walk past childhood fragments, locked in crystalline walls. You pass frozen doubts, frozen praises, frozen identities you once wore like armor. All of it preserved, none of it pursuing you anymore. Because here in the ice, nothing chases you. There's no clock, no threat, no mirror, only distance. Only time slowed into sculpture, and suddenly you feel it. A drop in temperature inside your chest. Not numbing, refining. Your breath slows, your body feels still but alert. You're not meditating, you're stopping. And it feels like remembering. Because before the noise of the world taught you to rush, to speak, to be someone, you were here. Pure presence, no task, no identity, no performance. Just being. That's what the ice mind experiment gives back. Not escape, but a return. A reminder that the person beneath the thoughts, the observer, the witness, the silence inside the silence, was never broken. Just buried. Under heat. Under movement. Under noise. And now, with everything paused, you can ask the questions that matter, not with words, but with listening. You ask, what am I carrying that doesn't need to move anymore? You ask, what noise did I mistake for direction? You ask, what part of me only speaks when the others stop shouting? And the answers don't arrive like sound. They arrive like clarity. A shape, a direction, a knowing. And then you know it's time. You begin to rise back up, not in a panic, not in a hurry, but gently, letting the warmth return, letting the motion stir. Letting the thoughts begin to unfreeze. But now, you choose which ones thaw. Some stay in the glacier, where they belong. Old stories, dead fears, obsolete beliefs. Let them stay buried. They've served their time, because now you've met the part of you that doesn't need to think to know, and you don't forget that. Even when the world gets loud again, even when the surface melts, even when life demands movement, you remember the cold. You remember the stillness, you remember the mind beneath the mind, and if you ever lose yourself again, just return to the ice. The forbidden desire exposure. There's something inside you that you don't say out loud. A want, a pull, a craving so private you've disguised it even from yourself. You don't talk about it, you barely think about it, because when you do, it burns. Not with joy, but with shame. This is the forbidden desire, and this is the moment you stop running from it. Start here. Close your eyes, slow your breath, Let the masks fall, the good one, the disciplined one, the version of you that's always in control. Let them all dissolve, until what's left is the raw want. The thing you've buried beneath performance, the thing that feels too dangerous to name. Now name it, not out loud, just internally. Say it as if no one will ever hear you, as if the universe already knows. Say the exact thing. Not the safe version, not the rational explanation. The real one. The unfiltered sentence that makes your heart tighten, that makes your stomach knot. That part of you believes will ruin your image if anyone ever found out. Say it. And now, sit with it. No fixing, no judging, no spiritual bypassing. Just sit with it. Because beneath the shame, there's something sacred. And until you feel the shame fully, you'll never get to the truth buried beneath it. This is the exposure. You were taught to fear this part of yourself. Maybe because you grew up in a house where desire was punished. Maybe because religion told you certain thoughts were sins. Maybe because you learned early that wanting too much meant being too much. So you learned to hide it, not just from others, but from yourself. You told yourself you didn't want that thing. You said, I'm above that. I'm better than that. But the truth never left. It just went underground. And what hides, rots. Desire doesn't disappear. It just mutates. It becomes addiction, obsession, control, envy, self-sabotage. It shows up in places you don't expect, in dreams that disturb you, in reactions that confuse you, in thoughts you disown. But what if desire isn't the enemy? What if the shame surrounding it is? Because the forbidden want isn't always evil. Sometimes it's a distorted version of something essential. The desire to be worshipped? Maybe it's the unmet need to be seen. The desire to disappear? Maybe it's a scream for silence, for space, for rest. The desire to dominate? Maybe it's the craving to finally not be helpless, the desire to run. Maybe it's the need to feel free. Don't excuse the harm, but don't ignore the root, because under every forbidden want is a wounded need. And when you stop shaming the desire, you can finally listen to the need. But that only happens after the exposure, only after you sit in the fire of your want, long enough to burn away the lie that says you're disgusting for having it. You are not disgusting. You are human. You are made of hunger, made of contradiction, made of electricity that doesn't always find clean wires. And if you spend your whole life suppressing what you want, you will never find out who you are underneath it. Because shame doesn't just hide your desires, it hides you. And when you let yourself feel the full truth of what you want, not to indulge it, but to see it, something breaks open. A clarity forms. You begin to understand. You didn't want the thing itself. You wanted what you thought it would give you. Power, safety, peace, touch, escape, worth. And once you see that, you can ask the real question. How do I meet that need without betraying myself to get it? That's where freedom lives. Not in denial, not in suppression, but in honest witnessing. So right now, wherever you are, let the want rise. Let the shame speak. Let it hiss. You shouldn't think that. Let it scream. What if someone knew? And then say back, I know, I see it, and I will not exile it anymore. Because the moment you stop rejecting that desire, it stops controlling you. It softens. It untwists. And it tells you what it was always trying to say. I just wanted to be heard, so hear it. Not to act on it, but to free it. To let the shadow breathe. Because when it does, the darkness clears, and you are still here, still worthy, still whole, not because you are pure, but because you are finally real. The mirror world transfer. Tonight, before you sleep, do this. Stand in front of a mirror. Look into your own eyes. Not for vanity, not for reassurance, but with curiosity, with caution, with reverence. And then imagine that the reflection is not you. Not really. Imagine it's a version of you that's alive, independent, waiting, mirroring for now. But the moment you close your eyes, it keeps going. Welcome to the mirror world transfer. A practice, a thought experiment, a quiet doorway. You fall asleep, but your reflection stays awake. It steps out of sync, out of frame, out of your control, and it begins to live a life without you. Not wildly different, not chaotic, but subtly off, slightly more bold, slightly more curious, slightly more free. And when you dream its memories, not yours. That's the rule. As you sleep, the mirror self moves forward, makes choices, turns corners you never reached, speaks words you never found. And if you pay attention, really pay attention, you might wake with a memory that doesn't belong. Not a fantasy, not imagination, but a sliver of something lived, a conversation you never had, a view you never saw, a version of yourself that said what needed to be said, and meant it. You'll brush your teeth and pause. You'll tie your shoes and feel déjà vu. You'll look in the mirror and for just a second, feel like the one inside is more awake than you are. That's the transfer. It doesn't happen with thunder. It doesn't rewrite your world overnight. It seeps in, gently, like fog, like intuition, like remembering something from a previous life that feels too familiar to ignore. And here's the mystery. The mirror version doesn't want to replace you. It wants to remind you of who you could have been if fear hadn't made the decisions, of the sentences you stopped halfway, of the truths you swallowed to make someone else more comfortable, of the life you almost lived. When you let your reflection keep going, when you give it permission to not wait for you, it starts showing you what's possible. It becomes the version of you that didn't flinch, that didn't hesitate, that didn't retreat every time the world narrowed its eyes. And the longer you practice this, the more the two of you blur. You sleep, it lives. You wake, it whispers. Not in words, but in instinct. In confidence you didn't earn. In peace you didn't chase. In a growing sense that somehow you've already lived this. And now you're just catching up. But be warned. The mirror world transfer is not about escape. It's not about fantasy. It's about integration. Because the reflection is still you. The realer part. The part you left behind in order to be accepted. The part that watches every day as you play small and waits for you to come home. When you fall asleep with the intention to let it move, you're sending a signal. I'm ready. Ready to remember what I forgot. Ready to recover the courage I abandoned. Ready to merge with the version of myself who never apologized for existing. So tonight, before bed, don't just collapse into sleep. Stand, face the mirror, and say quietly, "You don't have to wait for me anymore." Then close your eyes. Let it walk. Let it speak. Let it live the dream you're afraid to claim. And when morning comes, listen. You might remember something it did, that you never did. The playback control trick. Before sleep, rewind. Not your thoughts, not your feelings, your day. Play it backward like an old VHS tape, scene by scene, moment by moment, but in reverse. You brushing your teeth becomes toothpaste returning to the bristles, a rinse unhappening, words sucked back into your throat, shoes untying themselves, conversations unstitching mid-sentence, doors closing before they ever opened, every action unraveling. Keep going. Don't stop when it gets strange. Don't stop when the logic starts to fail. In fact, that's how you know it's working. The playback control trick isn't just a thought experiment. It's a key. One that opens the locked door between what you remember and what remembers you. As you rewind, things begin to slip. The structure of cause and effect starts to bend. The reason you poured a drink no longer exists, just the liquid lifting from your mouth and retreating into the glass. You laugh, but not because something was funny, just because sound is re-entering your chest like a reversal of breath. The brain tries to hold on, to anchor the timeline. But the more faithfully you rewind, the more confused it gets. Because time isn't just motion, it's meaning. And when you reverse the motion, the meaning collapses, the logic untangles. You become the observer of a script that no longer has a point. And in that moment, you slip out, unnoticed. That's the trick. The timeline has a rhythm, a pattern, a direction. When you disrupt that, when you unspool it backwards, you exit the rhythm without alerting the system. You're not supposed to be able to leave, but the system doesn't look for people who walk backward. So it doesn't stop you. And here's what happens next. You dream, but not as yourself. You wake, but not entirely here. You return, but slightly out of sync. Your body feels like yours, but thinner, delayed. You reach for something and hesitate, not because you forgot it, but because part of you remembers reaching for it yesterday, before you rewound, and the objects around you, They feel arranged, staged, like props resetting between takes. People repeat themselves, but with slight errors. Familiar words spoken in unfamiliar tones. You feel it in your bones. You left. Just long enough to question whether you ever came back. And the best part? No one notices. The timeline sealed behind you as if you never left. You could do it again tonight, and tomorrow, and the next. Each time slipping a little further out, playing your own life in reverse until it becomes something else, something non-linear, something weightless. You might lose memories. You might gain ones that don't belong to this version of you. You might wake up knowing the end of conversations that haven't happened yet, or missing details from moments that mattered, but you'll know. You'll feel the distance, the space between who you were when the day started and who you became while walking backward through it. This isn't forgetting. This is displacing. You are learning how to leave the track without derailing the train. You are becoming untraceable within your own history. And if that terrifies you, pause and rewind again. Because every time you reverse the reel, the tape gets looser, the script gets softer, and reality becomes optional. The sleep command override. You lie there again, lights off, the room quiet, the familiar restlessness just beginning to rise beneath the surface. You've done everything right, reduced the light, put your phone down, cleared your schedule, but sleep doesn't come when called politely. It hovers at a distance, taunting. And so, you wait. You hope. You repeat breathing techniques. You mentally count backward from 100, and still, nothing. But what if the problem isn't your mind's noise? What if the problem is that you're asking? What if sleep doesn't arrive through permission, but through command? Try this. Override the ritual. Interrupt the loop. Sit up inside your thoughts and take on a different posture. Not of surrender, but of control. And then say, not gently, not sweetly, but firmly, internally, with clarity and conviction, run sleep.exe. Now. Not please. Not if I do everything right. Just now. It sounds absurd at first, like you're tricking yourself, pretending you're a machine. But your brain is a machine, a biological supercomputer wired through patterns and commands. It doesn't always respond to emotion or coaxing, but it understands structure. It understands instruction. And sometimes, all it needs is a new language, one that's not emotional, but direct. Because here's what's rarely said. The body wants to follow. It's been waiting for certainty. And when you change your inner voice from pleading to programming, your nervous system listens differently. You aren't trying to find sleep anymore. You're executing it. Like launching a file. Like running a line of code that tells the entire system, we are done. Now shut down. This is the sleep command override. It's not about being robotic, it's about bypassing the noise of overthinking. Most people lie in bed waiting for a feeling to arrive, but the more you wait, the more you monitor. And the more you monitor, the more awake you become. You check your thoughts, you check the clock. You start writing tomorrow's plan in your head, all because sleep is something you're trying to catch. But sleep isn't a butterfly. It's a system function. And like all system functions, it can be triggered with the right signal. Of course, this won't work every time, not if you say it with doubt, not if you whisper it half-heartedly, still peeking around the corner of your thoughts, but if you say it like you mean it. If you believe it, even for a few seconds you may feel a shift, a gentle release, a quiet click, as if the mind, exhausted from being in charge, finally hears something it doesn't need to argue with. A directive, not a negotiation. This technique works best when paired with absolute stillness. No tossing, no adjusting. You freeze the body as if the command has already been obeyed. And then, you wait. Not like someone hoping for sleep, but like someone who knows it's already begun. You lie there as if the shutdown sequence is already running in the background. Because in many ways, it is. And over time, if you practice this override enough, your body starts to pair the phrase with a physiological response. It's Pavlovian. But with neural compliance, you say sleep.exe, now, and your muscles begin to soften, your breath slows, your thoughts stop chasing each other in circles. And eventually, the sleep you used to beg for arrives like an obedient program, launching itself in the quiet dark of your stillness. This doesn't mean sleep becomes instant. It means sleep becomes uncontested. It stops being a fight. It becomes a function, a process that doesn't need your emotional interference. You give the order. And then, like a system that trusts its own code, you release. This works because the mind is constantly listening to itself. And it doesn't know whether your thoughts are true or not. It only knows what they feel like. If your thoughts feel desperate, your body responds with tension. If they feel uncertain, your system stays alert. But when your thoughts feel like authority, calm, unwavering, final, the nervous system recognizes the command, and it begins to comply. So tonight, instead of waiting, hoping, spiraling, trying, sit quietly in your mind. Look at the dark. Feel your breath. And speak with clarity. Run sleep.exe now. Not as a wish, but as a system call. And then obey your own instruction. Let the program run. Let the thoughts fade. Let the shutdown begin. The fear reversal tactic. You're told to avoid it, to distract, to breathe through it, to not think about the thing that scares you most. But what if that's the mistake? What if the real power lies not in resisting fear, but walking directly into it? This is the fear reversal tactic. Close your eyes. Now bring it to mind. The worst case scenario. The one you avoid even in dreams. The moment your mind flinches from. The one that spikes your chest, tightens your breath, shuts the room down around you. Picture it fully. The failure, the fall, the betrayal, the silence, the loss. But now, don't fight it. Stay inside it. Stand in the very center of the thing you fear most. And do the unthinkable. Feel peace. Not because it's comfortable, not because it's good, but because it already happened in your mind. And you're still here. You're breathing. You're watching. You're not being pulled apart. You're observing the fear as shape, not prophecy. And when you stop resisting it, something shifts. The fear file, that little trigger in your nervous system that launches anxiety every time the memory flickers, begins to corrupt. It can't complete the loop, because the loop depends on panic, and you're giving it calm, so it glitches. The system stalls, and suddenly your brain doesn't know what to do with this old signal anymore. It gets quieter, not because you erased the fear, but because you met it without retreating. Your brain learns. This doesn't destroy us. This is survivable. And when it learns that, the anxiety doesn't launch next time, because it doesn't need to. You've already been there, in your mind. And you didn't run. You didn't flinch. You didn't try to pretend it wasn't real. You felt peace inside the fire. And that's not weakness. That's mastery. This is how warriors train. Not just in muscle, but in exposure. Not just in grit, but in surrender to the moment they used to flee from. Because fear, left unchallenged, grows in the dark. But fear, held in the light of willing attention, dissolves. And here's the strange part. The fear doesn't just stop hurting, it starts teaching. You begin to see things inside it you couldn't before. Not the monster, but the need. Not the terror, but the origin. You see where it started, why it clung to you, why it thought it had to shout to keep you safe. And once you listen to it without obeying it, something sacred opens. Trust in yourself. Not the performance self. Not the scripted, prepared, always fine self, but the deep core of you that says, I can hold pain without becoming it. I can face fear without fueling it. I can stand inside the storm and choose stillness. This isn't imagination, it's neuroplasticity. You are teaching your brain a new response pattern, because the body remembers trauma, but it also remembers safety. And when you introduce peace into the same space where panic used to live, you change the blueprint. Fear no longer holds you hostage. It becomes just another visitor. And you become the host that no longer flinches when it arrives. So try it again. Go back to that image, that worst moment. But this time, breathe softer. Let your muscles stay loose. Tell your body, we are not under attack. We are watching. And then feel it. All of it. The rejection, the crash, the goodbye, the collapse. Stay until it stops surprising you. Stay until the fear gets bored of your peace. And when you open your eyes, something in you will have changed. Not dramatically, not loudly, but permanently. The fear didn't win, because it was never fighting you. It was protecting you. Until you showed it, you didn't need protecting anymore. You needed presence. And now, you have it. And fear learns to stand down. The taste of memory hack. There's a memory inside you right now that you've forgotten. Not because it wasn't important, but because it hid itself, beneath time, beneath distraction, beneath all the versions of you that came after. A moment so subtle, so distant, that your mind let it go, but your body didn't. And tonight, you're going to find it. Not through thinking, not through digging, but through taste. This is the taste of memory hack, a strange, subtle technique that bypasses logic and goes straight to the sensory gatekeepers of your subconscious. Because memory doesn't just live in images, it lives in textures, in temperatures, in flavors that echo from years ago. So, here's what you do. Pick a flavor. Something you don't eat often, something unusual, specific. Maybe it's the tartness of green apple skin, the buttery warmth of cornbread, the bitter flicker of dark espresso. Maybe it's artificial, like cherry medicine, or something elemental, like salt water. Now, close your eyes and assign that flavor to a forgotten memory. Don't try to find the memory yet. Just pair the taste with the feeling of something that was once yours but has since gone silent. Let your body tell you what flavor feels like a doorway. Once you've chosen it, bring the flavor to your lips. If you can't taste it physically, imagine it vividly. Let it fill your mouth. Let your throat remember the weight of it. Let the temperature shift as if it were real. Then lie down, still, quiet, and let the flavor bloom behind your eyes. Your mind will resist. It will say, nothing's happening. Good. Let that lie pass, because the gate is already opening. The brain doesn't differentiate well between real sensation and imagined ones. The right flavor, paired with the right emotion, can trigger neural echoes. Forgotten doorways. You'll feel it as a flicker, a scene that returns for half a second, a smell you haven't known in years, a voice you didn't know you missed. You won't be able to tell if it's memory or dream. That's how you know it's working. Because the deepest memories aren't facts, they're impressions. A swing creaking on a humid day, a hallway lit by refrigerator glow, hands that held you before you had words. These moments don't return through logic, they return through senses, through the phantom flavor of something once tasted, once felt, once lost. And now your nervous system remembers, not through analysis, but through recognition. You won't understand why it hits so hard. Why that one bite, or that one imagined flavor, makes your eyes sting. But it will. Because you've just reunited with a piece of yourself that thought it was gone for good. And maybe you don't need to analyze it. Maybe you don't need to name the person or place or event. Maybe it's enough to feel the warmth, to feel the loss, to feel the presence of something that shaped you quietly and left behind a taste you didn't realize you were still craving. This is the hack. To use the body to unlock the past, to use flavor as a ritual of return. Because not all healing is verbal. Not all memory is narrative. Some of it is chemical. Some of it lives in saliva and skin and gut and nerve. Some of it tastes like home. So, tomorrow night, do it again. Choose another flavor, a new key. Keep tasting until something shifts, until your dreams become layered with echoes, until the past no longer feels distant, but tender, familiar, forgiven. Because the memory isn't trying to haunt you, it's trying to be witnessed, and taste is the most ancient witness you have, the part of you that never forgot. Not really, so let the flavor in. Let it tell its story, not in words, but in feelings, in fragments, in flickers that find their way back to your heart without needing permission. And when it happens, when the memory returns like a song you didn't know you knew, don't flinch. Just listen. Just taste. Just remember. The thought signal jammer. You can hear them again. Thoughts. Not gentle, not useful, not even coherent, just loud. Chatter on every channel. Worries disguised as strategies. Regret pretending to be reflection. Loops. Echoes. Noise. It's not thinking. It's interference. And the more you try to silence it, the louder it gets. Because thoughts don't like being ignored. They panic. They multiply. They claw their way back into center stage. But what if you don't fight them? What if you scramble them? What if, instead of turning the volume down, you turn it way up? Welcome to the thought signal jammer. It starts like this. Close your eyes. Now imagine a switchboard. Miles of tangled cables, dials spinning, antennas cracking with white energy. Visualize the sound, blaring static, raw and violent, like an untuned radio dial caught between dying stations. And now, imagine that sound filling your brain, like liquid static pouring over your cortex. Every channel, every thought stream, every private narration drowned beneath a flood of crackling white noise. You're not fighting thought, you're jamming it, because the mind runs on pattern, on signal, on rhythm, and when you inject pure static, sensory chaos without meaning, the thoughts begin to short out. They choke on the volume of themselves. They can't complete their loops, can't finish their sentences, can't maintain the illusion of coherence. It's like flooding a dictator's broadcast with noise. They still speak, but no one hears. And slowly that inner voice, the one you thought was you, begins to flicker. It scrambles, it stutters, it stalls, until all that's left is silence. Not emptiness, not numbness, just space. Clean space. You can feel the absence. Like stepping into a room after the air conditioner finally shuts off. A pressure you didn't know was crushing you suddenly lifts. That's the jam. You didn't fix the thoughts. You didn't outsmart them. You overloaded the system until it had no choice but to collapse into quiet. And in that quiet, you meet yourself. Not the voice, not the thinker, but the awareness behind it all. The one who listens, the one who endures the noise but doesn't need it. And once you've touched that silence, even for a few seconds, you realize most of your suffering isn't from thinking. It's from believing every thought demands your attention. They don't. They're signal. And signal can be jammed. The mind is a radio, but no one told you you're the listener. And you don't have to stay tuned to the madness. So, whenever your thoughts spiral, whenever they try to drag you into a storm, don't argue, don't analyze, don't repeat affirmations that the noise will only twist. Just close your eyes. Visualize the switchboard. Crank the static. Let it scream. Let the inner monologue drown under the weight of its own distortion. And then, wait. Eventually, it breaks. And the moment it does, you'll feel a kind of peace that doesn't come from silence, but from knowing you can choose it. That's the real freedom. Not a silent mind, but a voluntary one. So try it. Tonight, tomorrow. Anytime the thoughts grow teeth and start to bite. Don't run, don't obey, don't panic. Just jam the signal. Let them crash into white noise until they forget what they were saying. And when they do, step forward. Not as the thinker, but as the space between thoughts. The signal was never the truth. The silence always was. The cognitive shutdown button. Close your eyes. Breathe. Now, visualize a red switch right in the center of your chest, just beneath the sternum. It's not mechanical. It doesn't click. It hums, low and steady. Waiting. This is the cognitive shutdown button, and you've had it all along. You've just never dared to use it. Hover your awareness over it. Not with panic, not with resistance, just attention. Let it glow. Let it throb faintly under the skin like something alive, something built into your wiring long before you had words for fear. Now flip it. No countdown, no hesitation, just flip it. And then watch. The emotions don't explode, they don't scream or fight, they just stop. Like a machine powering down in stages. First the panic, then the worry, then the shame, then the flickers of hope. One by one, the lights dim. The voices fade, until all that's left is silence, not numbness, stillness, the absence of reaction, the death of noise. Your mind doesn't race anymore. It doesn't search for meaning. It doesn't ache to be understood. It just is. You just are. The world keeps moving. People talk, traffic flows, notifications buzz, but inside, you've pulled the plug, and what's left is a vacuum. Pure will, detached observation. You're not broken, you're not cold, you're in control. This isn't escapism. This is command, because emotions aren't always guidance. Sometimes they're static. Echoes, habits mistaken for truth. They cloud you, convince you that urgency is the same as importance, that discomfort means danger, that you must act, speak, solve. But now, you don't. You watch, detached, clear. You see the emotion rising, and it passes through you like vapor, because the button is on, and when it's on, you are untouchable. Not immune, just separate. No longer fused to every thought that tries to claim you. No longer hostage to every feeling that demands your attention. You are the witness, not the storm. You are the observer behind the curtain. You can still move, still choose, but now the choice is clean, untainted by noise, impulse, or old scars pretending to be instinct. You don't need to react. You don't need to fix. You don't need to protect a self that's already untouchable. This is not disconnection. This is a higher form of connection, one that begins after the flood recedes. Most people never find this button, or they're too afraid to press it. They think feeling everything means they're alive. But being flooded isn't the same as being awake. Sometimes the most alive you've ever been is the moment you stop chasing feeling altogether. You flip the switch and step outside the fire. And from that place, you finally see the shape of the fire itself. You see the old narratives, the reflexes, the loops. You see the way your mind has been moving you like a puppet. Not out of malice, but momentum. And now, the strings fall. Because will has taken over. Not aggression, not force. Just the calm certainty that you can pause anytime. That stillness isn't something that happens to you. It's something you create, on command. And when you're ready, only when you're ready, you can flip the switch back. Slowly. Let warmth return. Let sensation trickle in. Let the voices reawaken, one by one. But this time, they don't control you. You decide which ones to listen to, because now you know. The button exists, and it's yours. The flashback infection trick. There's a strange technique, subtle, eerie, difficult to explain until you've tried it. It's not a practice you learn in a book. It's not listed in psychology journals or taught in lucid dreaming circles. It's quieter than that, more dangerous, more useful. It's called the flashback infection trick. And here's how it works. You deliberately infect your dream with a real memory. Not fantasy, not projection, reality, a flashback, a moment from your actual life that carries emotional weight, raw, unresolved, visceral. You plant it like a virus inside the dream. And when it takes hold, when the dream logic tries to digest it, something breaks. Something wakes. Dreams aren't random. They're architectures of metaphor, stitched together by emotion, fear, hope, memory, and nonsense. They operate by rules of abstraction, displacement, and substitution. You're never quite you. Your mother is a doorway. Your house is a jungle. Your emotions wear other faces. Everything is real, but nothing is direct. It's how the brain protects you, filters you, confuses the truth long enough for you to rest. But the flashback infection trick bypasses that filter. It forces the real in, and when it does, the dream collapses. And what's left in the ruins is something far more honest than anything you've ever told yourself while awake. It begins in the twilight zone between waking and dreaming, that space where you're just about to slip under. You choose your flashback, not a mild one, not a sanitized version. Choose the one that still stings, the one that feels like it happened yesterday, no matter how far back it really was. A moment of shame, a moment of loss, a moment you've avoided, rewritten, buried. Then you hold it. Frame it like a photograph in your mind. Not as narrative, but as feeling. You remember the air, the sound, the bodily tension, and then you let yourself fall asleep with that image on loop. At first, the dream doesn't notice. It keeps its shape. The absurd continues. Clocks melt, you fly, someone you barely know becomes your parent. But the infected memory drifts in like a glitch, a flash of familiarity, a building from your real past in a dream city of nonsense. A sentence you actually heard years ago, repeated by a character who shouldn't know it. And your mind recoils. The illusion starts to strain. The dream tries to adjust. It disguises the memory, blurs it, substitutes it with symbols. But you already know. You're too aware now. The realism infects the metaphor. The timeline starts to split. You suddenly know that what's happening is wrong. Not because it's a dream, but because it's too real. The emotion isn't dreamlike anymore. It's rooted, sharp. Your body starts reacting, and then the collapse begins. You wake up, not with confusion, but with clarity, like something slamming into focus, like a lock clicking open. The infected dream dragged something out of storage, something you had filed under no longer relevant or too hard to feel. But now it's awake, on the surface. You remember how it really felt. and you realize that part of you never processed it, never released it, never forgave, never asked why. The insight doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it's just a shift in posture, an unease, a sudden understanding that you've been living around a wound, that a small piece of your personality, some tendency to flinch, to deflect, to chase perfection, started right there, in that flashback. And now, because you let it infect your sleep, you see it, not as an idea, as a lived pattern. This technique is not for everyone. It can be intense. It doesn't guarantee comfort. Sometimes it stirs more than it settles, but that's the point. Most healing doesn't come from peace. It comes from collision, from placing two things in the same space that were never meant to meet. The lie you told yourself to cope and the truth you locked away. Dream space is one of the only places where that meeting can happen without resistance. Because in dreams, the ego is asleep too. You're not trying to control the dream. You're not forcing lucidity. You're letting the infection do the work. The realism is the virus. It breaks the code. It distorts the symbols. It forces the dream to feel. And you, in turn, awaken with a fragment of that unprocessed emotion in your conscious hand. Like pulling a message from a fire. You read it in the morning and you don't always like what it says. But it's true. And it's yours. You might remember it vividly, or just feel different. Less defended, less confused, or more confused in the right way. The kind of confusion that signals transformation. You won't always know what to do with the insight. That's okay. The goal isn't resolution. The goal is access. And the flashback infection trick grants access to parts of your emotional system that no amount of thinking can unlock. Because you don't just dream to escape. You dream to remember, to excavate what the day buried, to say what your mouth refused to. And if you're brave enough to infect that space with a truth your waking self can't handle, your dreaming self just might show you how to carry it, or release it. So tonight, don't chase pleasant dreams, chase honest ones. Choose the memory, inject it, let the dream break, and watch what rises from the collapse. The Ghost Memory Protocol. Just before sleep, when your mind softens and your breath begins to slow, there's a window. Not quite waking, not quite dreaming, a strange thin veil between memory and imagination, where the two blend like vapor. And this is where the Ghost Memory Protocol begins. You don't revisit a real memory. You create one, not a fantasy, not a wish, but a moment that never happened, but should have. A missing scene from your life, a kindness no one gave you, a word you needed to hear, a room you should have been invited into, a version of you that was chosen, protected, held. You don't just think it, you build it. You see the weather, the lighting, the texture of the room, the shape of someone's face, their voice, soft or firm or trembling. And most importantly, how it made you feel. Safe, seen, loved. You sit inside this ghost memory like it's real. You don't analyze it, you live it. You let it wrap around your nervous system as if your body truly remembers, and your body does. Because the brain doesn't store memory as fact, it stores it as feeling. If you feel it deeply enough, your system can't tell the difference. The neurons wire, the emotions log, the event embeds. You fall asleep holding it. And when you wake up, something subtle has changed. The ache is quieter, the need is soothed. You act differently. Not because anything external changed, but because you're no longer waiting for the missing moment to arrive. You gave it to yourself. And here's where it gets stranger. Sometimes, reality begins to bend around the ghost. You meet someone who says the very words you heard in the dream. You walk into a room that feels exactly like the one you imagined. You're offered the kind of respect, space, or belonging you thought you'd only ever simulate, and it feels like déjà vu. But it's not memory. It's resonance. You projected a new possibility so strongly, so emotionally, that the world began to reflect it. Not through magic, through alignment. You stopped waiting for reality to give you what your nervous system was still craving, and instead, you pre-installed the experience. And when the craving calmed, your decisions changed. You walked taller. You didn't flinch at affection. You stopped begging silence to become love, because the part of you that had been searching for a missing page no longer needed to find it. It had already read it in the ghost memory, and now it lives as part of your story. But use this ritual carefully. Because what you imagine with pain becomes obsession, but what you imagine with resolution becomes truth. Don't rewrite a fantasy of revenge. Don't relive the wound with new faces. Give yourself completion. Imagine the apology, the embrace. The moment someone stepped in and didn't leave, feel it in your chest, let it be real enough, and then let sleep take it. Because during sleep, the mind consolidates emotional memory. It files the ghost alongside the real, and tomorrow, you move through the world slightly altered, like someone who was loved better than they remember. And maybe that becomes your new memory, your new magnet, your new point of reference, because sometimes the past doesn't need to be rewritten in fact. It only needs to be rewritten in feeling. And when feeling changes, identity changes. And when identity changes, so does everything else. So tonight, don't replay what happened. Write what should have, and let your body remember it, like it always did. The anxiety compression loop. Tonight, we try something different. Not to fight your anxiety, not to silence it, but to reshape how it lives in you. Because right now, it feels big, expansive, like a fog that fills the room before you even open your eyes. It doesn't shout, it hums. Low, constant, familiar. You don't always know what triggers it, but you know what it does. It tightens your breath, it shortens your sentences, it tricks your body into thinking that stillness is dangerous and sleep is surrender. So we begin here, with breath, with imagination, with a loop designed to compress the thing you've been carrying, and place it somewhere you can finally rest. This is the anxiety compression loop. Start by closing your eyes. Visualize your anxiety, not as a feeling, but as a shape, a glowing sphere, bright, pulsing, hovering somewhere in your chest. Don't judge it. Don't fear it. Just observe. This is the container of all your racing thoughts, all your what-ifs, all the tension in your jaw, all the unfinished sentences you never said out loud. Now, take a slow breath in, and as you exhale, imagine that glowing sphere beginning to shrink, tighter, smaller, as if your breath itself is pressing it inward. You're not deleting the anxiety. You're condensing it, transforming it from fog to form, from chaos to clarity. Watch it shrink from the size of your chest to a ball in your stomach, then from your stomach to a marble in your hip, then smaller still, until it becomes a tiny flickering ember. Now, imagine sliding that ember, carefully, gently, down your body, past your thigh, past your knee, down into your heel. Feel it settle there. Feel it trap there, like a spark sealed beneath glass, still glowing, still present, but no longer in control, no longer allowed to rise. You've buried it, not in shame, not in fear, but in an intention. Your heel, the part of your body furthest from your mind, the grounding point, the part that touches earth when you walk. You've placed it there, not to forget it, but to root it, to make it small, manageable, distant. You are not denying your anxiety. You're redefining its place, because it doesn't get to live in your chest anymore. It doesn't get to crawl up your throat when the room goes silent. It doesn't get to sit on your eyelids when you try to sleep. It has a home now, in your heel, contained, tamed, still glowing but no longer growing. And if it tries to rise, breathe again, compress it again, loop the process. Inhale calm, exhale compression, shrinking, trapping, burying, until the rest of your body can feel light, free, quiet. This is not escapism. This is nervous system engineering. You are giving your mind a ritual, a visual language, a practice that says, I see you, I hear you, but you don't get to own me. Not tonight. Tonight your body belongs to rest, to dreams, to the version of you that exists beyond survival. So let the compression loop run again. One last time. Breathe in. See the anxiety glow. Breathe out. Watch it shrink. Down, 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 until it rests in your heel like a stone in your shoe you've grown used to, but no longer feel. And now, sleep. Not in defiance, but in trust. Because the loop will hold the pressure. And you get to soften, to drift, to return to the place where fear is no longer the narrator, just a background light you've learned how to dim. The regret replication trap. Pick one regret. Not the kind that makes you shrug, the kind that lives in your bones, the one that returns at night, when it's quiet, uninvited, unrelenting. Maybe it's something you said, or didn't. A moment that slipped. A decision that cost you more than time. You know the one. Now do something strange. Take that regret, and imagine it being repeated, but not in your voice, in theirs. The voice of the person who taught you how to feel ashamed. The one who told you how heavy a mistake should feel. A parent, a teacher, a sibling, a friend, a lover. Maybe someone who never said it aloud, but looked at you with that tone, that disappointment, that silence, that pause long enough to plant a seed of self-blame. Let them say it. Your regret, spoken in their tone, their cadence, their judgment. Hear it clearly. And you'll notice something. The weight shifts, because suddenly, you're not just reliving the moment, you're realizing the frame it was given, the story wrapped around it, the way someone else's values, fears, or pain were downloaded into your nervous system without your permission. You've been carrying their voice as your conscience, but it was never entirely yours to begin with. That's the trap. Most regrets aren't just about what we did, they're about how we were taught to feel about what we did. You didn't write the punishment. You inherited it. You absorbed someone else's tone, someone else's shame. You took their disappointment and stitched it into your memory like it belonged there. And every time you revisit the regret, you don't just replay the event, you replay the judgment. But now that you've heard it in their voice, you can separate. You can notice the difference between what actually happened and how it was interpreted. You can begin to ask, was it really that bad? Or was I trained to believe it was unforgivable? Was it a misstep? Or did someone teach me that mistakes define identity? Was it a choice made in confusion? Or did I learn that confusion equals failure? Because the voice that taught you regret was probably carrying its own echo, its own inherited shame. That's how it works. Regret replicates. It passes through generations, relationships, systems, not as wisdom but as weight. And you became the next carrier. You were handed the tone, the pause, the silence. You were told, this is how regret should feel. And so it did. But now you can hear it. And that's the beginning of release. Because when you hear your regret in someone else's voice, it no longer sounds like truth. It sounds like history, like conditioning, like something given to you, not something born of you. And from that space, something miraculous happens. You begin to reclaim your own voice. You look at the regret. Not to erase it, not to justify it, but to own it without the inherited shame. You say, yes, I did that. Yes, it hurt. But I decide what it means now. Not them, not their voice, not their rules. Because regret is not meant to be a sentence. It's meant to be a signal, a moment of pause, of growth, of redirection. Not a life of silent self-punishment whispered in someone else's vocabulary. So try it. Tonight. Tomorrow. Anytime that heavy regret shows up again, replay it. But change the voice, and when you hear it, notice what drops, notice what doesn't belong, and let it go, because your voice is waiting, not to forget the regret, but to rewrite the meaning. The Sleepwalk identity swap. Before you sleep tonight, lie to yourself. Not casually, not playfully, with full conviction. Tell your mind that you are someone else, someone entirely different. Not a version of you, not a future self, a stranger, a name you make up, a life you've never lived, a body you've never known. Picture the details, where they sleep, how they breathe, what they fear. What memory makes them wince in silence? Convince your subconscious that you are them. Do this long enough, and your dreams will respond. You won't be dreaming as yourself. You'll be dreaming through someone else. You'll walk their streets, love their people, carry their regrets, and for a few hours, their pain will be yours. Their voice will speak in your head like it always belonged. You'll feel the texture of their memories, not like watching, but remembering, as if these moments were lived by you, as if they shaped your spine, colored your choices, bent your life in ways you never understood, until now. And then, you wake. But something's wrong, because you remember things that don't belong to you. You grieve someone you've never met. You fear places you've never seen. And worst of all, You don't fully remember who you were before the dream, just flashes. A face in the mirror that doesn't feel quite right. A name that sounds correct, but hollow. You tell yourself it was just a dream. But it wasn't, because you didn't imagine the other life. You became it. And when you woke up, only one of you made it back. The mind doesn't fully understand identity. It's more fluid than we admit. Your memories feel solid, but they're flexible. Your personality feels fixed, but it's adaptive. You are not one self. You are a flickering narrative told just convincingly enough to hold you together. And the moment you step into another story, even in sleep, you blur the edges. You shake the container. And once that shape melts, who wakes up? Is it still you? Or is it someone else pretending to be you now? Because if you can dream a life and carry its emotions, if you can wake up and cry for things you never lived, then how do you know the life you live now wasn't someone else's dream once? How do you know you haven't been swapping identities every night, waking up in a different self with just enough continuity to keep moving forward? You don't. And that's the point. The Sleepwalk identity swap isn't a game. It's a crack in the mirror, a chance to step out of yourself and risk not returning fully. And maybe that's freedom. Or maybe it's the most elegant form of self-erasure ever designed. Either way, tonight, when you close your eyes, choose who you are, but choose carefully, because in the morning, someone will wake up, and they'll have your face, your name, but maybe not your soul. The brain mirror trick: close your eyes, slow your breath, and imagine, not symbolically but with raw precision, that you're holding your own brain in your hands, not floating through some dreamscape, physically, as if you've reached inside your skull and removed it. It's warm, it pulses slightly, it's heavier than you expected, and now comes the strange part. You turn it. Slowly, you rotate your brain toward a mirror, not to see your face, not to reflect your identity, but to reflect your thoughts. And in that reflection, something impossible begins to happen. They reverse. You see your thoughts backward, not mirrored in language, but in logic. The sentences loop and fold in on themselves. Assumptions collapse. Certainties deconstruct. Your opinions unravel like film reels running in reverse. You stare at the mirror, and instead of reading your thoughts as affirmations of truth, you read them as inversions, each belief now interrogated, each emotion traced back to its source, but distorted. Not less true, just shown from the side you've never dared to look at. That's the brain mirror trick. A mental technique that doesn't just offer introspection, it flips it. You're not trying to better understand what you already think. You're trying to see the shape of your thoughts if they had formed in the opposite direction. You're asking, if this belief had grown backward, what would its roots have looked like? If this fear were reverse engineered, what false certainty would I find embedded beneath it? Take a simple example. You think, I'm not good enough. In the mirror, the reverse logic shows you not weakness, but a belief in unreachable perfection. Something internalized, not inherent. The reflection reveals not truth, but origin. The moment your mind absorbed a standard, not from experience, but from 1,000 silent comparisons you didn't even know you were making. And now, instead of hearing, I'm not good enough, as a verdict, you hear it as an echo, from someone else's voice, from a culture, a parent, a moment you didn't know mattered, or take, they don't love me anymore. Reversed in the mirror, it becomes, I still crave validation from someone who already showed me their limits. It's not rejection. It's misplaced repetition. It's not loss. It's misdirection of loyalty. The mirror doesn't soften the thought. It reformats it. Strips the illusion. Shows you the scaffolding, not the performance. This trick works best when you don't try to control it. You don't invent opposite thoughts manually. You observe them, passively. Like watching a river run backward. You let your judgments, fears, assumptions all play out. And then you look at their shadows. You ask, if this thought were a defense, what is it protecting? If this logic is a mask, what face is hiding underneath? Reverse logic doesn't contradict, it reveals. And the deeper you go, the weirder it gets. Thoughts that once felt solid begin to feel like choices. Narratives begin to wobble. The core story of who you think you are, of what motivates you, what defines you, what you're capable of, begins to lose weight. Because in the mirror, you see not a fixed brain, but a script processor. something that builds internal reality out of fragments, patterns, and safety mechanisms. And you realize, if it can construct a narrative one way, it can also construct it another. You start to realize that many of your strongest feelings weren't born of truth. They were born of need. That sadness didn't just come from loss. It came from an expectation that was never yours. That anger didn't come from betrayal, but from the shattering of illusion. That confidence wasn't always confidence. It was survival rebranded. And now that you've flipped the lens, you don't see thoughts as commands. You see them as drafts. That's what this mirror does. It makes you the editor of your own mental code. It shows you where the lines were copied from someone else, where they loop, where they contradict. You stop being afraid of intrusive thoughts. You stop worshiping empowering ones, because now you know. They're all temporary. They're all reflections. They're all artifacts of the mind, trying to stay coherent in a world that rarely is. And sometimes, in this mirror, you'll find something beautiful, a belief that holds up even in reverse, a thought like, I deserve peace. And the mirror doesn't distort it. It echoes it. It says, even when you feel broken, even when you question everything, there is a part of you that knows peace is your default, not your reward. These are the thoughts you keep. These are the ones that survive inversion, the ones that are rooted, not in ego or fear, but in clarity. You don't stay in the mirror forever. You close the session. You return the brain, mentally, metaphorically, to its place. But something has changed. You don't trust your thoughts blindly anymore. You don't fear them either. You watch them, you test them, you flip them over like puzzle pieces, inspecting the other side. Because now you know that what you think isn't always what's real. It's what's running. And every system that runs can be debugged, rewritten, reframed, and sometimes the only way to see the truth is to look at it backward. The dream role assignment. There's a doorway hidden between wakefulness and sleep. A space just wide enough to whisper something into your own subconscious before the dream takes over. And that's where the ritual begins. The dream role assignment. You don't fall asleep as yourself. You assign yourself a role, not randomly, intentionally. You choose an archetype, a shape for your mind to wear. Villain, trickster, hero, god, witness, phantom, machine. You say the role silently. You feel it in your chest. You imagine what it would mean to become it, even if only for one night. You don't act it out. You let it enter you. And as your body falls into sleep, your mind begins to obey. The dream adapts. You start seeing from behind different eyes. The moral compass bends. The rules dissolve. The world treats you differently. Not because it changed, but because you did. If you assign yourself the villain, you stop justifying. You stop hiding your hunger. The dream feeds you moments where power is easy, where control feels natural. You don't apologize for taking up space. And when you wake up, you carry a piece of that unapologetic fire. Not evil, just unmasked. If you choose the trickster, logic distorts. You dream in puzzles. You laugh through fear. You say things no one else can get away with. And when you rise, the world feels lighter. Rules feel bendable. You stop taking yourself so seriously, and your creativity spikes. Assign yourself the god, and your dream shifts scale. You see cities as maps, people as stories. Your voice bends gravity. You don't chase, you don't ask, you declare. And waking up, the remnants of that power remain. You stop shrinking. You remember the divine is not outside you. It's a role you can step into at will. The mind doesn't question the role, it follows it. The dream, the symbols, the tone, all restructure around the identity you whispered into yourself before sleep. Because dreams are not random. They are responsive. They reflect belief. And this ritual creates a temporary override. You don't just rehearse a new version of yourself, you embody it through feeling, through narrative, through subconscious permission. And with enough repetition, the assigned role stops being temporary, and it begins to leak into your waking mind. You notice yourself thinking differently, reacting differently. You no longer default to the same emotions, the same explanations, because the self is just a mask that's been worn too many nights in a row. And this ritual gives you new masks, ones you choose instead of the ones you inherited. But there's a warning in this. Every role becomes easier to wear the longer you sleep in it. Assign yourself the villain long enough and you may forget softness. Choose the trickster too often, and your sincerity may decay. Worship the god, and your empathy may blur. So rotate with care. Don't escape into roles. Experiment with them. The purpose isn't to perform. It's to remember that you are not fixed. You are fluid, shifting, programmable by your own imagination. And the dream is your rehearsal space, where you try on courage or cruelty, where you wear desire without shame, where you face fear without collapse, where you see what it feels like to not be you and survive. So tonight, before sleep takes you, stop scrolling, stop thinking, stop clinging to your waking name. Close your eyes and choose. Choose a role that unlocks something hidden, that frees a limb, softens a wall, sharpens a thought. Say it inside yourself. Let it settle, then sleep. And when the dream begins, let go. Let the costume take shape. Let the story play out. And when you wake, ask yourself not what the dream meant, but what it made you become. The Chrono-Distortion Breathing. Close your eyes. Now forget what time feels like. Forget the clock. Forget the numbers. Forget the idea that each second is equal. Time is not linear. Time is not fair. Time is not fixed. It bends. It folds. It lingers in moments of fear and vanishes in moments of bliss. It is elastic. It is responsive. And tonight, you're going to breathe with it. This is the Chrono-Distortion Breathing, a technique that doesn't just calm your body, it bends your perception of time itself. A loop that stretches the now and compresses the then until time no longer feels like a ruler, but a ribbon. Begin here. Inhale. And as you breathe in, imagine time stretching forward, like you're pulling the string of the universe ahead of you. One breath, one ripple at a time. Watch it elongate. Watch it pull the seconds into hours, the hours into space. You are stretching time, not just into the future, but into possibility. Hold. And now, exhale. Slowly. And as you do, imagine time recoiling, compressing, folding backward, like memory in reverse, like a reel tightening. The past condensing into light, sound, pressure. Again, inhale, stretch time forward. Exhale, pull it back. You are no longer inside time. You are moving it, shaping it, loop by loop. Let your breath become the pendulum, not swinging from side to side, but stretching from future to past and back again until the difference between them starts to blur. Because here's what they never taught you. Time is not something you pass through. It's something your mind generates. And with each breath, you change the tempo. Faster breath, time races. Slower breath, time thickens, suspends, distorts. And if you breathe in this pattern long enough, something begins to shift. The walls between moments begin to dissolve. You forget whether it's late or early, whether you're falling asleep or waking up inside someone else's memory. That's the fold. That's when the dream begins. Not in sleep, but in timelessness. Keep breathing. Inhale, forward stretch. Future expansion, possibility widening. Exhale, backward contraction. Memory shrinking, identity softening. You are collapsing time into breath. You are pulling threads from every version of yourself, childhood, now, later, never, and weaving them into a single inhale, a single exhale. And in that weaving, you become untethered. This is not just relaxation. This is time travel through stillness, and it requires nothing but your breath. No machines, no mathematics, just presence. Because when you master the loop, forward stretch, backward fold, you exit the system that told you time is your master. You realize it's been your mirror all along. You've watched hours melt while waiting. You've watched minutes disappear while dancing. Time has always responded to how you feel it. And now, you feel it differently. You feel it like silk, like smoke, like breath folding into breath until the beginning and the end feel the same. That's where the dream begins. Not a dream you watch, but a dream you generate. You float, you expand, you rewind, you repeat. Because this loop is infinite. Inhale forward, exhale back. And somewhere in that loop, the story you were telling about what day it is breaks. You don't need to know. Because time is no longer a hallway. It's a pool. And you are suspended, supported, softened. This is how you enter sleep. not by forcing yourself into silence, but by folding time until sleep becomes the only direction left. So keep going. Inhale, expand into tomorrow. Exhale, compress into yesterday. Again and again, until your breath becomes the clock, and the clock becomes meaningless, until all that's left is you, floating, looping, timeless. The forbidden word mantra, there's a word you were told never to say. Maybe not outright, maybe not with rules, but with glances, with reactions, with silence, a word that changed the temperature in the room the moment it neared your lips, a word you learned to fear, not because of what it meant, but because of what it might unlock. You know the one. It sits in your memory like a sealed envelope. Sometimes it was anger, sometimes desire, sometimes grief, sometimes something stranger, something sacred, something primal, a name, a truth, a boundary, a confession. You don't even have to say it aloud to feel the tension rise. Just thinking about it sends a pulse through your body, a tightening, a hesitation, a flash of guilt like you're violating some ancient law just by remembering. But what if that word holds a door? What if silence was the trap? Tonight, try this. Find a moment when the world has quieted, when the lights are low and the noise has softened. Lay down, breathe, feel the weight of your body against the bed, and then lean in close to your pillow. Whisper the word, softly, not with defiance, not with fear, with reverence, with curiosity, with the full awareness that this word was buried for a reason, and you're about to dig it up. This is the forbidden word mantra, not a chant, not a rebellion, a release. Because the moment you whisper the forbidden, you invite the hidden. You open the vault where the unspoken has been echoing for years, waiting for permission to speak. And then, you dream. Not like usual, not noise, not nonsense, but messages. You may not remember all of them, but you'll feel them. In the chest, in the spine, in the knowing. Your subconscious has been rehearsing truths you were never allowed to say. Now, it's free to show you. Watch what emerges. Symbols from childhood that never made sense. Faces of people you never properly said goodbye to. Versions of yourself that were locked away to make someone else more comfortable. This isn't about magic. It's about access. Your psyche protects you, sometimes too well. It builds walls around what might cause rupture, rejection, or judgment. But it doesn't destroy those truths. It stores them. And the forbidden word? It's the key. Because language isn't neutral. Words carry charge, memory, permission. And when you whisper a word you were told to bury, you send a signal to your deepest self. I'm ready to see what was hidden. Even if it's messy. Even if it's painful. Even if it changes everything. That's what dreams are for. Not just to entertain, but to process what the waking world forbids. And most of your life, you've been trained to self-censor, not just in speech, but in thought. You learned which topics were too heavy, which emotions too inconvenient, which truths too disruptive. So you swallowed them, and they became the dream. Waiting. And now, one word breaks the seal, not because the word itself is powerful, but because you gave it back its meaning, because you whispered it not in fear, but in invitation. And what comes next may not be gentle. You may wake shaken. You may feel like something ancient just passed through you. But you will know. You touched something real. Something that had waited in the dark for far too long. So ask yourself, what's the word? Not the loudest one. Not the one meant to shock. The one that makes your heart beat faster when you even think about saying it aloud. Whisper it. Let it open the gate. And when the dreams arrive, don't run. Watch, feel, remember. Because the truth you fear saying is often the truth that saves you. The chaos calibration ritual. Picture your mind as a storm, not a metaphorical storm, a real one. Wind howling, thoughts crashing like waves, lightning striking through memories you can't control. This isn't anxiety. This isn't overthinking. This is chaos in its rawest form. And when it hits, most people do the same thing. They fight it. They try to calm down. They breathe slower. Repeat mantras. Visualize peace. They build walls. They try to silence the noise. But here's the truth no one tells you. The storm doesn't respond to resistance. The more you try to suppress it, the louder it gets. The more you run from the wind, the harder it pulls. The storm isn't something outside you. It is you. The storm is your truth, amplified. This is where the chaos calibration ritual begins. You don't fight the chaos, you sync with it. That sounds impossible, doesn't it? Why would you want to align with the very thing that's tearing your mind apart? Because inside the storm, if you stop resisting, there is perfect clarity. Not peace, not silence, but stillness inside motion. A quiet eye in the center of chaos. Think of a spinning top. When it moves fast enough, it appears still. You can see through it. It holds its balance not in spite of the motion, but because of it. Your thoughts are the same. When you try to slow them down, you break the motion. You interrupt the pattern. But when you let them spin, unjudged, unrestricted, you begin to see the shape of them, the rhythm, the intelligence beneath the noise. This is not meditation in the traditional sense. This is immersion. You close your eyes and step into the storm willingly. You don't dodge the thoughts. You let them pass through. You don't label them as good or bad. You just watch them scream. You surrender not to the content of the chaos, but to its structure. You begin to notice how thoughts loop, how emotions echo, how fear has a frequency. And when you tune to that frequency, something unlocks. You're not overwhelmed. You're calibrated. You're synced with the very system that once drowned you. Because the human brain isn't a calm machine. It's electric. It's tidal. It's built to process vast, conflicting data and find meaning inside contradiction. But only when you stop trying to force it into linear order. Only when you accept that clarity doesn't always look like silence. Sometimes, it looks like standing still while everything else moves. Let's take an example. Say you're overwhelmed with indecision. 3 choices, all urgent, all pulling in different directions. Your instinct is to slow down, isolate each option, analyze, but the mind is storming. So instead, you enter the storm. You imagine the chaos as wind, as pressure. You feel it. You don't shrink away. You become the center of it. Let the thoughts scream. Let them overlap. And watch what happens. Patterns emerge. Certain thoughts repeat. Others fade. You stop reacting. You start witnessing. And inside that witnessing, the right answer surfaces. Not because you solved it, but because the noise made space for it to reveal itself. This is what most people never understand. Clarity doesn't come after the chaos. It lives inside it. The ritual is not about control. It's about surrender with awareness. You don't lose yourself. You meet yourself at the most intense point of confusion and realize you've been guiding the storm all along. This works in emotion too. When grief floods in, when anger rattles your ribs, when sadness spreads across your skin like cold water. Don't suppress. Don't escape. Step into it. Name the movement. Feel the tempo. Let it rise. And then listen, not to the words in your head, but to the rhythm of what's happening. There's intelligence there. Chaos is not dysfunction. It is high-frequency order not yet translated into language. And once you stop fearing it, you begin to speak its code. This is the calibration. Not escape, not control, alignment. And when you've synced, when you felt the storm pass through without resistance, you'll find something you didn't expect. Stillness. Not because the chaos left, but because you finally joined it. You matched its rhythm. And that matching is clarity. That matching is freedom. That matching is where your truest self speaks. So next time the storm comes, don't run. Don't breathe it away. Don't force it to be quiet. Instead, stand tall. Step into the ritual. Let the winds tear through your thoughts. Let the patterns reveal themselves and feel the shift. Not when the storm ends, but when you finally stop trying to escape it. Because that's the moment you realize the chaos wasn't the enemy. It was the signal. And you were never drowning. You were learning how to dance in the storm. The observer deletion test. Ask yourself, quietly, without expecting an answer, what if I'm not the observer, but the observed? Say it again. Let it echo. Let it sit in your skull like a code you don't understand. Not once, not twice, but over and over, slowly, rhythmically, until the meaning begins to twist, until your inner narrative starts to flicker, until the familiar voice in your mind, the one that watches, narrates, explains, starts to feel exposed, watched. Because that question isn't just a mental game, it's a trap door, A small phrase that eats away at the most foundational illusion of consciousness, that you are the one looking out, that there is a self behind the eyes, above the thoughts, steering the ship, the eye behind the curtain, the camera behind the lens. But what happens if that assumption breaks? What happens if the observer is an illusion? What happens if you are what's being observed? This is the observer deletion test. It doesn't require belief. It doesn't require enlightenment, just repetition. The question itself does the work. With each pass, your internal reference points start to bend. Thoughts no longer arise as commentary. They begin to feel like data. Your emotions no longer anchor you. They hover, untethered, floating in awareness that's no longer yours. Even memory loosens its grip, as if recalling itself for someone else. The body becomes an exhibit. The voice in your head becomes a performance. And the you that used to feel central begins to feel peripheral, like an object being studied, not a subject doing the studying. Repeat. What if I'm not the observer, but the observed? Say it in silence. Breathe. Watch. Something will shift. The process can be slow at first, subtle. You'll notice your mind trying to resist, trying to reassert itself. It will say, of course I'm the observer. I'm the one asking the question. I'm the one noticing this shift. But notice that too. Notice the desperation in that claim, the way it grasps at authority, the way it refuses to dissolve, because the ego doesn't fear pain nearly as much as it fears invisibility. And this test, this recursive silent test, is a slow erasure of the ego's throne. Keep repeating. Let the phrase become background noise, a mantra that burns through assumptions, a mental solvent. With each repetition, you start to feel less like a person having a thought, and more like a thought having a person. You are no longer the spotlight. You are the stage. And every sensation, every word, every fleeting idea is performing itself. Not for you, but to you. And you are not in control. At some point, something breaks, or melts, or softens. You may feel it as a sudden drop in narrative tension, a peace that isn't calming but hollowing, a presence without position, a consciousness with no center. You realize you can still see, but you're not behind the eyes. You can still think, but the thoughts are ambient, not authored. You can still feel, but the feelings no longer prove you exist. They just happen, like wind, like static. If you do this before sleep, the effect is even stranger. Your body stays heavy, still, your thoughts keep cycling, but you no longer feel like the one hosting them. Sleep doesn't approach like an escape. It arrives like a shutdown, a surrender of observation, a quieting not just of thoughts, but of the thinker itself. And if you're lucky or unlucky, you may drift into dreams where you're not even in them. You're not the protagonist. You're not the camera. You're the air in the room, the background noise, the flicker of a television screen that no one's watching anymore. And if you're awake when this realization hits, it might feel like a small death, a loss of self not to despair, but to mystery. You are not who you thought you were. You never were. You were always the observed. The light never came from behind your eyes. It came at you, through you, around you. You're not in the center of the scene. You are the scene, and every sensation you've claimed as mine was just another visitor passing through. It's disorienting. It's destabilizing. But it's also freeing. When the observer is gone, there's nothing left to defend. No self to uphold. No identity to perform. You become witness and witnessed, movement and stillness, awareness and object. And what's left in that space beyond definition is something wordless, something true. So ask again, what if I'm not the observer, but the observed? Say it until the thoughts fall silent. Say it until you fall asleep. Or say it until there's no one left to say it at all.